Well, I'd like to call this Owensboro Board of Commissioners special called meeting, May 27, 2020, to order, please. At this time, I will ask City Clerk Beth Cecil to please call the roll.
Commissioner Jeff Sanford.
Here.
Commissioner Larry Conder.
Here.
Mayor Tom Watson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Larry Magliner.
Here.
Commissioner Pam Smithwright.
Here.
Thank you. Item 3 on the agenda, the 2020-2021 budget presentation. Who do I call on?
I think I'm up first, Mayor.
Okay. City Manager Nate Pagan, please take the floor.
Happy to, Mayor. And Mayor and Commissioners, good afternoon, and welcome to one of the most fun days of the year, for me at least, and that is the annual budget presentation.
That is gross.
Warped.
Maybe a little bit. This is an important document that guides much of what staff does for the rest of the year. The budget is the culmination of countless hours of diligent work from our staff. I'd like to acknowledge now the finance staff and our department heads, supervisors, and managers who have been involved in drafting this budget from the beginning. In many respects, it begins with in the departments, comes here for us to be combined, and then it goes back to the departments for them to implement throughout the year. So it is a true team effort. Obviously, the presentation looks a little bit different this year just because we're trying to observe COVID restrictions as best we can. So instead of having all staff in the chambers with us now, we'll cycle through one at a time. So for example, Tim Ross is up first here in a few minutes. So, and then after him will be Abby. And so they'll cycle through one at a time, and we'll sit here next to me to present their various departments as we progress through the presentation. As always, this meeting is available on various platforms to be available and transparent to the community, and it's especially important right now because of COVID restrictions and the lack of community access. So this is our agenda for today. We'll start with some background or context, then we'll work through expenditures from departments. Then Angela Hamrick will present our estimated revenues, and then look at forecast for subsequent years, or what we call the long-range plan, looking at a 5-year period of annual budgets. This graph shows employment, or the number of jobs in our community. Obviously, the drop on the right is very visible, and it represents the loss of jobs recently due to COVID-19. Obviously, COVID will be a theme that we will talk about in several different times throughout the budget. I'm sorry.
When we need to ask questions, let's just raise our hand, okay? Are you taking in, on that other, on the unemployment, you taking into consideration people that have been furloughed, or people that are still on the payroll but are not working? Is that just a number?
That's a number on this chart, is just a number that the state puts out that we track.
State puts out.
That's right. Now, we'll talk a little bit more specifically in the revenue section, I think, about what we looked at as far as what rates we looked at and how we compiled the numbers and looking on a month-by-month basis. So we'll get in some of that detail a little bit later, I believe.
Thank you.
So that's the employment chart. So correspondingly with a decrease in the number of jobs comes an increase in our unemployment rate. The Davis County unemployment rate is the red. And even though our rate has increased over the last couple of months, we still remain well below the state rate, which is the blue graph, or the blue line, rather. One reason we typically cite for our low employment as a strength of our local economy is our diversity of businesses and major employers. Again, we'll talk about COVID more specifically in a moment, but this slides highlight a recent Messenger Inquirer article in which EDC President Brittany Johnson discussed a recent study that showed we are better prepared to weather COVID than most communities in the country. And I would dare say that we are even better prepared relative to other cities in the Commonwealth, thanks to our diverse local economy and our employers. So as we turn more specifically to the budget, this is a broad overview, or some of those major themes that everyone always is curious about. So from the beginning, this budget assumes or makes no proposed changes to our various tax rates. So again, no proposed tax rates are included in the budget for 2021. It is a balanced general fund budget. Of course, the general fund is our primary operating fund that involves most of our personnel and involves really the primary taxes that we typically talk about as far as property tax, insurance premium, occupational net profit. Those are generally what fund our general fund budget. And so it is a balanced budget that actually shows a surplus of $28,636. Pension funding is a challenge that we've talked about many times in the past, and I suspect we'll be talking about many more times for many more years into the future. And so we do, of course, have increases in those rates a little bit, but that's better than expected, as we'll talk about in a minute. But it is something that we have continued to deal with. An emphasis in the current budget was infrastructure. I know that's a priority to all of us, and so really Public Works and Public Works infrastructure was probably one of the winners in the current budget. We'll talk more specifically when Wayne is seated up here beside me later in the presentation, but we essentially doubled the amount of funding for sidewalks. And I say Wayne was a winner because he's probably the only one who got more money than he even asked for, because we actually gave Wayne and Kevin an additional $200,000 above their request for paving for next year. So I think they were definitely a winner in our proposed budget. And then again, has been referenced the COVID-19 implications. Yes, sir, Commissioner Condor.
Could you state the first one again, slow and loud?
On infrastructure?
No, just
the first one,
bullet point.
no proposed tax rates.
Thank you, sir.
Changes.
I'm done. I'm good.
You're going to talk about COVID-19.
I am.
When you get finished, I'll ask you a question.
Okay. And then, of course, COVID-19 implications. Obviously, our timeline and schedule for the budget process got delayed a little bit. And this budget does look different than what it would have looked like 2 months ago if we'd have presented it based on the information we had at that time. And that's what this slide tries to capture, is the difference related to COVID of what the budget would have looked like a month or two ago compares to what it looks like now. So we have had, because of COVID, reduced general fund revenue to the tune of $1.5 million. It's about $1.1 million in reduced occupational tax proceeds, reduced net profit revenue of $250,000, and $143,078 of reduced road aid, which is our portion of the gas tax that flows back to the city from the state. So those three general fund sources are reduced by $1.5 million from where they would have been 2 months ago. Also, there's higher subsidies that will result from COVID. Primarily, this is related to the convention center, the sports center, and then parks implications, because there'll be less people going to events, probably less kids taking swim lessons if the pool's open at all. And so there's just implications to that, either in reduced revenue. In some cases, yes, we have reduced costs that offset that as well, but not in every case. So that is a negative implication to the tune of $321,000. And then also, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but we did budget $200,000 for what we called a COVID contingency. That's just that. It's a contingency that's a placeholder for future needs, whether it needs to be for making up revenue that's lower than anticipated, or whether it's unanticipated expenses. Just knowing that we're in a situation that's a little bit unprecedented for all of us. And so we wanted to have a contingency of some sizable amount there that we could tap into should that we need to. So those three factors combined total $2,027,551. There is, however, a slight silver lining. As part of the CARES Act, or the stimulus bills that have done in response to COVID-19, we did get a sizable allocation for federal transit dollars. So we'll talk about those again more specifically during the public works portion when we talk about transit with Wayne and Pamela later on. But that allowed us to basically defer or not make the general fund transfer that we normally would have made. So typically to fund transit is a 50-50 match between the city and the state or federal funds. And so it was going to cost us $994,000 out of the general fund from a general fund transfer for our operating match that we do not have to make now, because we are able to use federal funds in lieu of local dollars. So it saves our general fund that $994,000. So it's definitely a sizable silver lining. Doesn't make it a revenue neutral deal for us, but it certainly helps, and so we appreciate that. Mayor, did you have a question, you said?
Yeah, wish I could remember. Oh, yeah. You know, since a lot of cities are struggling, did they waive that balanced budget requirement for cities out of Frankfurt, or delay it? I haven't been able to find that anywhere.
As far as I know, they've not waived the balanced budget requirement. Of course, the flexibility lies in how you can balance it however you want. So you can use prior
Okay.
year revenue, so even though, to satisfy that requirement. So it's probably not anything they would have to waive because there's ways around it.
So why have it?
Good question. I don't know. Yeah, sure.
Yes, Mayor. In some years past, the city of Owensboro actually used a portion of the fund balance to balance the budget.
see.
And that's considered a balanced budget. Now, should we not have had sufficient fund balance to accommodate that, that would not be a balanced budget. So the government Frankfurt just wants to be sure that your fund balance plus your revenues less your expenses, that you don't wind up in a negative fund balance is what the driver is.
Well, you know, at a time when all these other cities that might be struggling, we're not struggling. We need to toot that horn a little bit, make sure that people that want to locate their new business or whatever understand that we're in better shape than probably 70% of the cities in the state.
Certainly, I'd say probably at least that, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, this slide highlights the various staff changes that are proposed in the budget for discussion today. So the first staff change is one additional patrol officer for the Owensboro Police Department. However, that's really to offset the loss of an officer because we will be providing an additional school resource officer to Owensboro Middle School. We've historically provided an SRO to the high school, but the city school system has requested that we provide an additional officer to the middle school. We're happy to do that. We appreciate the partnership with the school system. However, we don't want to lose an officer off the street, so we're basically just adding an officer to make up for the one that's going to OMS. The school system will pay 100% of that position for the 10 or so months that it does operate as a school resource officer at Owensboro Middle School. So, 80+% of that cost is actually paid by Owensboro Public Schools, and then during the summer or the Christmas holidays when he's available to us, we pay that cost. So while it is a staff position, it's at a minimal cost to us, and it's really a pass-through, so we don't lose an officer from the street.
So it includes benefits too?
It does.
We even charge them for a portion of the vehicle in their air card. on
Good
their-
job, Angela.
That's right. Next is a new position in community development. Community development used to have staff of 3 or 4, but it's been a department of 1 for the last several years. So recognizing the challenges that Abby has and some of the plans that I know that we have as she rolls from Triplet Twist into the Northwest area, thought that she could use some help. So we are proposing a new position for her as a new housing and grant coordinator funded for 6 months in the budget. So we would hire that as a mid-year position as we haven't currently devised. Property maintenance has been a point of emphasis over the last year or two. If you recall, we've added additional funds for demolition. Actually, last year we added a second full-time position in that department, and then more recently we've actually redone the ordinance to strengthen some of our property maintenance standards and streamline that process. So we'd like to continue that as a point of emphasis, and we're proposing to add a third person to that department. It would be a part-time inspector that would be partially paid from the general fund and then also partially paid from the sanitation fund as well. So not a large cost to us. Again, part-time position. It would partially be offset by the sanitation fund. Similarly, Wayne is proposing an additional laborer for the stormwater ditch crew. That's the crew that basically mucks dishes and mows basins and keeps water flowing through the community. However, it is not a net cost because it will be offset by a reduced and outsourced or temp agencies that we use. So we'd like to have one more full-time and we have a 100% offsetting cost by a reduction in outside or a temp agency. So really no increase related to that position. And then again, in a similar vein, is an additional full-time driver from transit. You may remember in the middle of the current year budget, we did a similar program where we swapped out 7 or 8 part-time drivers for 1 full-time driver. So again, we're proposing to do something very similar. I think this would switch 6 part-time drivers for 1 full-time. There's a net cost only of about $5,400. It's very, very difficult for them to keep part-time CDL drivers. They can really go work as anywhere they want. And so we're just not able to retain the part-time drivers very well. It's much easier for us to keep the full-time driver. So again, swapping out 6 part-times for 1 full-time and a cost of only $5,357. So relatively minor in the grand scheme of things.
Will any of those part-time drivers be offered the full-time position?
I don't know. I'd have to ask Wayne and Josh, but certainly if they're, I think most of them are probably vacant is the problem.
Oh, I see.
Because they have difficulty filling them.
Okay.
Reference pension costs just briefly a little bit ago. Again, they've been a recurring issue for us and will remain so in the future. This slide shows what we anticipate the cost being for the pension increase for the current year, 2021, and then for the next 3 years as well. However, this number is actually much better than we had originally expected. You may recall that a few years ago, the state put a 12% cap on the annual increases year over year, I think through the year 2028. So we expect to have those 12% increases every year. And again, the numbers on this slide are only the increases, not the total cost of pensions to us. Luckily, though, this year the state came back at the last minute during the legislative session and passed a bill that froze our rate for the year. So therefore, our increase year over year is the $236,804 you see on there at the top. If you look at the asterisk that identifies the $757,899, that was the additional cost that we would have had the state enforced or implemented that 12% year over year increase like we had originally planned. You'll also probably recall a couple of years ago, we set up what we call the pension reserve or the CERS reserve, which is essentially a savings account for the future pension costs that we know will be coming. And obviously, as our pension costs will increase at a much faster rate than our revenues will increase, so we need some money set aside to help in the future to pay down those pension costs. So because the state gave us a 1-year reprieve in that increase for next year, we're proposing to go ahead and fund what we would have had as a cost, and instead of having it as a cost now, just to put that in the pension reserve account. Again, it's a cost that we'll have eventually, and so we'd like to go ahead and have that saved at this time. I think after this, that would put our pension reserve account to somewhere in the range of $3.2 million if that transfer is approved by the commission. So certainly a good start on the savings that we know the state will put on us into the future.
So they basically kicked the can down the road again another year.
They kicked the can for that year. Also, as part of that bill, is to set a new 30-year amortization period. So we're in the midst of one now. I think we had 23 years to go, either 22 or 23 years to go on an amortization period, and we're going to a new 30-year period. So from a personal finance standpoint, it would be like you having 23 years on your mortgage and you refinance into a 30-year mortgage. It helps with the cash flow in some respects because your payment's not going to be as much or not going to go up as much. However, over the life of the loan, you're going to pay more in interest. So what they're doing may help us, in subsequent years initially, but long term, it probably increases the total bill a little bit. Hence, the importance of saving for those future costs because they are an obligation of the city. We carry that obligation on our audit and on our books. So, it is something that we feel is this good management that we've prepared to pay that cost to the extent that we can.
Agreed.
Shared budget factors are those items that you'll see that pretty much impact every department as we go through a department by department basis. Our health insurance costs did go up by about 14% this year, and that is our cost, and the employees' costs went up proportionally as well. Like many organizations, we do grapple with health insurance costs. And so at some point, we may be looking at a more sizable restructuring of our plan or offerings, but that is something that we'll look at in the future. However, you will see as we go through the departments that there was an increase in insurance-related costs. We were able to fund the STEP for employees. Of course, we have a grade and STEP plan where employees are compensated based on their years of service or experience. And so the cost of that was $178,000. We included a 3% cost of living adjustment. And then, of course, the pension increase to $236,000, which is the same as we discussed on the previous slide. So when we look at the department's budgets individually in a moment, all those are kind of generally lumped into the personnel category. And you'll see that the personnel costs generally went up a pretty sizable amount. And in many of the departments, it was actually the bulk of increases were related to personnel items, which would be captured in insurance, step, cost of living adjustment, and pension cost. So you'll see that pretty consistently. Those numbers have gone up across the board because of those numbers. Excuse me. Now, list utilities there, even though it's at zero net cost, because again, the way we budget revenues and expenditures are separately. So when we look at the budget for public events, we're only looking at public events expenses. There's no looking at the revenues because we don't net budget, Mayor, as we talked about. So each department has an allocation of utilities. However, we can't really go back and credit the revenue there. So the revenue is an offsetting revenue for utilities. So some of the budgets, it looks like there's a sizable increase for utility expenditures. However, it's not really an increased cost or a net cost to the city because of our relationship with OMU. So it gets kind of technical, but if you remember, OMU made some rate adjustments last year or early this year. It was a net decrease to the customer, but they have 2 or 3 different rates. If you remember, there was an increase in the base rate, but there was an offsetting decrease in the ECA and the ECCA. As the city, we don't actually pay the ECA or the ECCA. So that doesn't get billed to us, so we don't theoretically get that credit. Now, we don't need it anyway because we don't pay the bill in general because of the payment in lieu of tax program. But because they do technically charge us the base rate, even though we get revenue to offset the base rate, you know, it shows as a cost to the department. So it looks like, I'll show you an example here shortly. So it looks like there's an increase in utilities when you look at the individual budgets, but it's really not an increase in cost.
I'll make a comment now. I want to thank Nate Pagan for, I've been here almost 8 years, and finally he's got me to where I understand this a whole lot better. His ability to understand this ridiculous accounting system that municipals have is really good, and I want to thank him personally for getting me over the hump, because I was at the hump and I was going down. Thank you very much.
Yep. So again, those are shared factors that you'll see that impact every department's budget. So as we transition to the first department, this is just sort of a reminder. Again, we do fund-based budgeting, and so this is just kind of the general summary of funds and how they work. The primary fund, again, is on the left, the general fund. That funds the majority of our departments. We do have a few special revenue funds, primarily economic development and your community vision, that we'll talk about later in the presentation. Leland will brief the commission on the YCV budget. Capital projects budget, whenever a project is funded, it migrates there, just I guess mainly for accounting purposes and tracking. Enterprise funds are business-like services, primarily sanitation and the rec fund and transit, that have a fee for service that we are better able to track, more like a business enterprise, essentially. And then internal service funds are those funds that provide services to other departments of the city, such as the city garage, with the mechanics. So the mechanics are billed out based on the departments who use the service, facilities maintenance, insurance, and those kind of things. So just internal service funds that we use basically internally. So as we transition to the first department, this is the citywide org chart. Of course, the citizens are first, commission, and then we get into the various staff. And so you'll see this, and then we'll rotate on to the department at hand. And so this is the department chart for what we call admin or administration. So that's the city clerk, assistant city manager, Tim is the public events director, Abby Shelton, community development, and then the city attorney. That's our administration, who is here generally on the 4th floor and 2nd floor. The administration totals expenses of $1,196,000. That is a 10% increase, which is $104,086 year over year. Although if you look at that first bullet point there, like I referenced a minute ago, personnel costs have gone up pretty consistently. That's again insurance, utility, or insurance, pension, and salaries, and those types of costs. And so you can see that went up 11%. So that is $100,000 of the $104,000 increase for administration is in personnel. Again, look at the bottom bullet point there in utilities. That's slated to go up 8%. Again, not an actual cost to us, but that's a prorated cost to the administration. So again, between personnel and utilities, that's $103,322 of the $104,000 increase.
So I don't know, but y'all kind of feel like Forrest Gump, when he had that $1 million wound. Said he never saw a nickel of that. I'm wondering where our $100,000 comes. Did any of y'all ever seen any of that? Or the personnel? Did anybody get figure any of that 100,000? I'm just curious, just
Yeah, a big chunk is health insurance and those
Just-
increased costs. And
just to break the down a
Yep.
little bit. Oh, well.
Okay, then moving on, you see highlighted in yellow is public events. So up next is Tim Ross, Director of Public Events.
Thank you, Commissioner Nate. Good afternoon. A brief overview of public events. Obviously, with the current state of the community and the country as a whole, most of the events have been on hold for a little bit, but yet we do see light at the end of the tunnel, and we're certainly hoping that things continue to trend in the right direction, that some of these things can open up as we're hoping this summer and this fall. So we have continued to plan like we do to be ready to get those events fired up. We obviously had a lot of them on the burner, ready to rock and roll pretty quick, and being on hold, they're still ready. I do want to let the commission know, obviously, we've got contingency plans for several of the big signature events, the music series, that if things are still on hold for a few more weeks, we're looking at potentially continuing those longer into the fall than we normally do, to keep some more activity and entertainment things going on throughout the community, to give people a chance to get out and do something.
So give me an example of that.
Like one of the music series, Friday After 5 made the decision on theirs to cancel it,
Right.
the whole season, because their concern was that if they're not able to start until mid-July, potentially, or end of July, well, they're done normally with their season by the end of August. So if the first 10 to 12 weeks of that was canceled, they could only do 4 weeks. They decided it wasn't in the best interest of them and all their partners and community folks. So they decided to do that, which is fine. We do a series on Saturday nights. It's a little smaller. It's spread out more. We normally start that around the same time in May, and we go through at the end of September. So we've talked to the artists and kind of rescheduled and bumped things out, that if we can't start, and we're hoping maybe by late June, if things continue to trend, they bump things up, maybe we could start it in the next 3 or 4 weeks from now. But if not, we'll start it in July and go through August and September, but maybe we continue that all the way through October, to be determined, to extend that some. Things like the Hydra Fair that are currently scheduled for middle of August. We've got some contingency plans or dates in place for later in August or even into September and late September. So a big assumption, but assuming that things continue to improve and things like high school football are allowed to start in late August or September, then that would kind of open up the gates for some of those larger gatherings. So we don't want to put dates out for that yet for people to start planning, because we're really hoping that we could continue those in August when they originally planned for. I think nationally everybody's looking at it and things are improving. Testing, they keep saying there's increased numbers of positive cases, but everybody's testing so many more people, so that affects the numbers. So we'll see where it goes nationally, but we haven't canceled our July 4th plans yet. I know a lot of communities have, but there's several communities in the Commonwealth, including ourselves, that are still hopeful that maybe we could do it. But if we can't, we've got some contingency plans for that maybe we could do something on another weekend in August or September. We've got some plans in place for the bridge lighting. I'm sure Leland will reference that as that work continues to get those lights done on the bridge, that hopefully we can have a big celebration that the community's been waiting for quite some time on the bridge lighting, and we can do an event with that. So this budget, again, that we'll look at briefly is the normal kind of big signature events that normally take place in the spring and summer and fall, realizing that we might just have to shift the dates a little bit on it. As Nate referenced, they're overall, you can see it at the very top, it's a very small increase in net dollars, basically almost a 0%, just over $2,000 total. There is an increase in personnel, as Nate referenced, predominantly just the insurance and the pension, medical insurance and pension costs that are going up there. Maintenance, and that's all the support that Public Works provides for all of the events that happen, whether it's the Making Strides Breast Cancer Walk or Barbecue Fest, whatever it is. They've got a few more hours, and obviously when personnel costs go up, those hours to support that goes up, but that's still a pretty small increase for the amount of work that those teams do to support those. You'll see a pretty big variance there in supplies and other, and that's twofold. One is that it's just a kind of a restructuring. We got a couple of main categories that we work with in contractual services or supplies for events. And the way with some of our big events that were planned for next fiscal year being Hydro Fair, the way that some of the finances are set up and the contracts for that, it's just a recategorizing of some of those. So that's why one dropped pretty significantly, but the other one went up a little chunk too. So that's the predominant, but we're anticipating Hydro Fair to be a little bit less expensive than some of the bigger air shows that we've done, which is great. So overall for the budget, it's a net increase of just a couple $1,000s on the year. But again, we're planning to do events and hope to have a pretty robust late summer and fall time just as soon as we can get going on it. Again, quick overview for it. Obviously, for folks that are watching at home and might not know what all we do for public events, and as far as programming goes, we've got a handful of signature events that we produce specifically to bring visitors to our community. Things like July 4, and a lot of local folks might only think that it's just the locals that drive down to the river and watch fireworks. It's more than that. We know we get visitors from all over the place that come and fill those hotels along the river, and it's a busy weekend. Hydro Fair, we've gotten numerous phone calls. It's a good side effect, if you want to call it that, from some of the lockdown, that some early events and races have been canceled. And so I've had a couple of emails from folks this week, even from Illinois and one from Ohio, that are planning to come to Owensboro. Can't wait for when we confirm it. So things like that bring visitors to the community is what we're trying to drive and help the restaurants and the businesses in our community. And then we also partner, my department does, with lots of other nonprofit organizations and events in town to help them make their events, bigger and better. And there's lots of opportunities that the city can do very well, and we partner with them, and they use their expertise, and we use our expertise to kind of partner on those to make those events as big as they can be, for things like the Color Blast or Friday After 5 and catfishing tournaments and things like that. So that's the quick overview of what it is. And then again, the finances, it's a small increase, predominantly just from the insurance and pension costs. Yes, sir.
Tim, I want to thank you for working hard to keep these events happening.
Yes, sir.
I know it's tough, but looks like we might be able to get some of these events in and get everybody back down to normal. Yeah,
it's certainly going to be a new normal, and we know, even for the time being, as soon as we can get things like Live on the Banks or Friday After 5, we've had conversations with Laura at the convention center about some ideas that they've got to be able to implement some live music and get people out doing things, but it's still going to be, at least for the foreseeable future, that term, physical or social distancing that we're going to keep, right? And we're still going to be recommending face coverings for a time, even if you are outside. So, hopefully the medical community will get this thing and nip it in the bud, sooner than later, and we can get back to what we think is a normal. But, we really want to get going as soon as we can. But that being said, even if we could do, as soon as we're able to do something like July 4th, we're still going to recommend the community to, really be cognizant of the distancing with people that aren't in their immediate group. Just like when you go to a restaurant, when you come down to Don Mario's or Bar Louie or any of those, you're going to be spaced out from folks, and we're going to be recommending the masks as well. So we know the community will get behind it and support it. We just want to make sure that when we get a chance to gather, that everybody helps work with each other so we make it a success and that we don't take 2 steps backwards by not doing it right. Yes, sir.
Tim, logistically for the 4th of July, would there not be a way to spread people out downtown, depending on where we're at with be a way to get people spread out enough to have it, or are we waiting on what the state says, or what are we looking for?
Sure, yeah.
Pull things off.
Sure, that's a great question, and a lot of it comes down to just the size, the density of that crowd, honestly. There's lots of folks that are saying, I'll use an example of a college football game, or even if you're going to go to the Kentucky Derby, you could limit the size crowd that's coming in because you have a gate that's going to limit that. So we know if our total capacity is 100,000, we're only going to sell 35,000 seats. And if you bought tickets for you and your wife and kids, okay, there's a group of 4, and here's where you're going to sit. And we know our computer system can block out those seats directly behind you and on the sides of you and in front of you. And Laura and I have had this conversation already at the Sports Center, and they've got everything in place to be able to do it as soon as they can start hosting concerts and such again. The challenge is when we do something like July 4th, is you've got people coming from 8 city blocks by 8 city blocks that are all just kind of descending in that space. And so to be able to limit the total capacity is a challenge, and that's what some of the state officials are still hoping to do. And then how do we ensure that you maintain that distance from folks? right? So, you know, as a simple analogy, even if when you go to the beach, as I lived on the beach in Florida for years, when you go, typically you're not within 6 feet of the stranger next to you, but yet at times, if you go Memorial Weekend or July 4 weekend, man, it's slamming, and you probably do have somebody that's 3 or 4 feet from you. So we can't really ensure the social distancing when it comes to that size crowd in that space. And again, if I'm not a medical professional, but we're taking advice from the state, you know, Dr. Stack and those on the state level, talking with Clay 2 and 3 times a week in his office here with the health department. So like I said, we want to do it right, and that's our goal. And so certainly from my position, Nate and I have had conversations, Leland and I have, and they know that I continue to push for, hey, let's hold on. We still want to do this. Let's not cancel anything too soon. So that's our goal, but we want to make sure that we're following the guidelines that the state's given us as well as our local health officials.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, this is a question about the barbecue festival.
Yes, sir.
Since we didn't have it this year,
Mm-hmm.
has there been any discussion on how to restructure this thing? Because it's not anything like it used to be. There's only 4 or 5 cooking teams. It's turned into a backyard cooking thing, and it's kind of like a county fair downtown. And I don't know what kind of control we have over all that. They got their own committee. But has there been any discussion on how to try and, redesign that to be so that it can continue to be a barbecue festival and not a it seems like to me, and I may be all wrong, it seems like it's a kind of a county fair, and it's straight out all over the street. So is that the best we're going to be able to do?
I wouldn't necessarily say the best that we're going to be able to do. I know in the last 5 and 6 years, it's gotten a little bit more focused on barbecue, believe it or not, trying to grow that backyard cooks area with the competing teams that travel around and do that. They've looked at ways to be able to expand the time that they're out there, and that's one of the challenges to it, Mayor, that I'm sure that you're referencing. If you go down there Friday evening, there's nobody really cooking any barbecue because the backyard cooks is only on Saturday, and the teams, you know, the 5 church teams that are still participating aren't out there cooking on, you know, Friday evening. So if you show up after work on Friday, you don't see that. Those discussions do certainly continue, and there's, you know, what makes Barbecue Festival unique in Owensboro is the church teams. That's what it started with. You can go to a barbecue festival anywhere you want, and they have them all over the place, and some look like a county fair, and some are just, you know, 5 or 6 barbecue pit masters, and that's it. And so this is kind of a mix of the both of them. But I was actually at a meeting this year, Mayor, with the representatives from those churches that still participate, and it's honestly just a challenge with them to have enough volunteers and
Right.
guys on the team to come out and do it.
It's
And
hard
that's,
work.
it is, and that's why they've lost a lot of them, unfortunately, to do that. So the festival, the plan this year was even to kind of support those churches even more to make sure that you don't lose them. Because if you lost those churches, then in essence, you don't have what the International Barbecue Festival is, which is those church teams with the big kettles and the big pits. So there are certainly efforts that they're trying to make to ensure that those teams stay the core, and the rest of the festival might look different, you know, than what everybody remembers from 15 and 20 years ago, just because those churches are so much smaller, that church group. But the goal is to add as much barbecue as we can, and so they're trying to expand that backyard team and hopefully even expand the times that those are being offered. This year they were working with Kentucky Legend to add some sampling tent, just Kentucky Legend products. It's all barbecue that you can smoke in your backyard, to try to add more barbecue throughout the length of it. So that's one of the committee's aware of that and trying to keep as much barbecue focus as possible.
Okay, go ahead, Pam.
Well, I was just going to add that it's part of it too is finding young people who are interested in doing this.
Sure.
And I find the same thing with our veterans groups. You know, the young veterans aren't interested in the VFW and all of those things. Their minds are somewhere else. I don't know if it's because of their families or whatever it is, but the barbecue teams, I'm on the festival committee, and they're having problems just finding some young people who want to step up and get involved with that.
I cooked myself for 7 or 8 years on Blessed Mother or Lourdes, but once you get past 50, it's a job. I mean, it is and all the guys on the team, they're all 70 years old now.
Right.
And they give out.
But when you did it, it was interesting for you, but these young people now, it's, you know, it's not what they want to do.
I got shamed into doing it.
Oh, you really didn't want to do it either, huh?
And that's one of the things that the committee had looked at doing, honestly, and we met with the churches, like I said, and they had offered, the festival committee was going to be contracting with, making a donation to a couple of local groups just to provide some labor
Yeah.
to help those churches set up and tear down some of that more laborious work that some of those seniors just can't do, and they don't have enough folks to be able to do it, honestly. So the committee, like I said, the committee's aware, and they're trying to help keep, because that's the core of it, is those churches doing it.
Go ahead. Nice.
Thank you, Mayor. Tim, with everything that has just basically been shut down, it's almost like we're going to have to reinvent ourselves when it comes to events anyway. And the mayor brings up, and Commissioner Smith Wright, a perfect point of the barbecue festival, having to reinvent itself. So let's look out in the future, say a couple of years from now. What will we see different than what we have experienced for the last 20, 30 years? What's it going to look like? I was sure you've talked to your peers about this, that things will change. What will it look like?
Yeah, honestly, Commissioner, it's a hard question because we don't know. The community, Nate and I had the conversation this morning, we commented on the community as a whole will kind of dictate what changes are going to come about, if that makes sense.
It'll be consumer driven.
Right. So, you know, restaurants were dying to get on board last week, and they love the outdoor seating, and we had numerous responses from them. Thank you so much for expanding that. But yet there's a certain part of the population that's going to be apprehensive to go to things with larger size crowds, right? And so even if it is Friday after 5 or July 4th and those big, where you got so much crowd density, it's going to be consumer driven, and we don't know yet. We would assume that those crowds will come back once the concern about the vaccines or treatments for COVID come about, that all of that concern would then go away. And we would think that that those crowds then come back. But my goal has always been from the city. I've never thought it's the city's job to fund and to create all of the Disneyland for you know, our community. It's not our job to do that. But yet I think the city helping create 3 or 4 signature events during the year to draw the masses in, and then partner with these smaller ones. And you know, some of the events that are great in our community were ones that came about by other organizations that we just kind of got on board with to help out. You know, Wendell Foster's half marathon, we have not had a significant size half marathon. We've struggled with dates and different things to try to get one, and they kind of hit it out of the park for a first time event, and hopefully that continues to grow. You know, I think there's other times of the year that we can look to build some things. We've tried, other groups have tried different things in the cooler months to see if we can do it, but again, it's going to be consumer driven, and we'll know whether or not, you know, what the participation is down the road once consumers. So I don't have a definitive answer, but I think 3 or 4 signature things during the year, and those might change or evolve a little bit. But once we get past the concern of the COVID, I think it gets back to a little bit more of a normal. And I think, you know, the live music thing that Friday After 5 built is there's communities all over the place that are trying to copycat that, and they've been doing that for 3 and 4 years. So I think we can make some little tweaks to continue to improve those, but I honestly think Owensboro is doing a great job as far as the energy level and the drawing folks in regularly to things that happen, because from May and through September, people are coming to Owensboro 3 and 4 times a week to do different activities. Does that answer somewhat?
Basically, you don't have a crystal ball to be able to see what's going to happen.
Shockingly, no, we don't. I mean, like I said, and we've got ideas for some other things, you know, that we don't want to get into too many details because we don't know how to evolve out, but some other types of events maybe that we've seen from other markets and things that we want to do. You know, Leland and I have had several conversations about ways that we can expand, you know, some ideas that the commission's brought up before too. So we continue to talk with lots of groups like Bluegrass Museum and River Park Center and how we can partner and how their business model might be changing a little bit as well.
Before I forget, can I finish my thought here? Okay, so we got the mall, got all that surface parking, and Randy Landham and I were talking, and so what we figured we could do was set the showmobile up out there, and we had all the people would come in their car and be like a drive-in movie, and you could set over the Home Depot, Walmart, and you could have it a radio station program, put it on so you could get it in your car, and you could raise some money for nonprofits that way. So, and you could do the fireworks out there while you're at it. So I just throw those little Tinkerbell things out there.
Did you bug our phones the last few weeks?
No.
Okay, just making sure. Yes, we've been discussing all those exact same things, yeah, with a couple of different groups, honestly.
Yeah, and you could raise money for this musicians aren't making any money now.
Sure.
And I think it'd be a kind of a cool thing.
Mhm.
And your social distancing could be done by the cars
Mhm.
until they get out. And the only thing I couldn't figure out is where they're gonna go to the bathroom.
Right.
So, but it's that's a flat spot. You got a lot of parking. You could actually put a screen up, kind of like they do at the Bluegrass
Mhm.
at the romp. And it might be kind of a neat event to think about. So since you've already been thinking about it, never mind.
No, it's perfect. You can come work with us.
No, I got nothing to say, Grace, over. Thank you. Pam?
I just wanted to say something about that, about the barbecue festival. When it started out, it was all Catholic churches. The main churches were all Catholic churches, and I'm Baptist, and we barbecue pretty good too. So, maybe if they incorporated more churches, different denominations, instead of limiting, it could bring it back.
Sure.
That's why we got $700,000 in the event planner. Let them figure it out, won't we? Thank you. Anybody else?
Mayor, I would add, Tim is our link or administers everything with Spectra related to the Sports Center and the Convention Center. I know Laura, I believe, is here.
She is.
So if there's any comments or questions for her, I don't know, we didn't necessarily have any slides directly, maybe in the back a few, but if there are any questions about implications for them for next fiscal year, this is the time to ask those as well.
To Tim or to Laura?
Well, both.
Either or.
Yeah.
Question? I think
Center related?
my only question was, I think we've looked at it, is the extra subsidy that we're going to probably have to do over last year due to the loss of revenue. That is a revenue generator.
It is.
That's the only question I would have. I know, being in healthcare, I listen to all that stuff too, so. You excuse me just a minute.
Jumping ahead. Making my eyes hurt here, dude.
Yeah, so if there are any specific questions for Convention Center or Sports Center, we got a couple of slides that just shows what, proposed revenues and subsidies are for the coming year. And then more specifically, if you've got budget numbers, Laura can answer those. I've got them on pages that I would know, but she'll know them quicker off the top of her head. Commissioner Sanford, did you have something about Sports Center were you starting to say?
I want to ask, Laura, when would be the next event that you have that you feel like you might be able to have at some? What could you have and when? You think?
It really depends on the type of event that you're looking at. Right now, with the way that everybody is looking at the industry, they're looking at coming back a little bit quicker on some things. For example, we have already designed the Sports Center, if that's what you're talking about, the Sports Center. With the Sports Center, we've already designed it where you could socially distance and you'd be able to have groups of 4, like household groups of 4, household groups of 2 around the entire arena. It limits your capacity down to about 500 people. So that would be a perfect situation that you could do for a church service because churches are able to be open right now. So it really depends on the type of event because of the state guidelines, and churches are able to open right now.
So that guideline is based on, so you say 500 people and the Sports Center holds how many?
Normally it holds about 5,000.
When would you be able to, at what level, where are we at now? We're in 1, and then it goes to 2 and 3?
Right.
When can you get it to like half full?
At this point, the way the governor has his mandates and his reopening plan, the only, as far as mass gatherings, it only is going up to 50 people as of July 1. There's nothing else as far as anything like, is it going to bump up to 100? Will it bump up to 250? Will that be a month later? Will that be just a week later? There's nothing beyond that as far as the mass gathering. So we're getting very creative in trying to figure out how we can do certain events.
Okay, all right, thank you.
At the Convention Center, I will say we just got confirmation this morning that we could host Pigtails and Cowlicks because they are a retail event and that'll be in mid-June. So as long as we're following the guidelines under retail and doing some additional things, to be honest, the health department did say it was okay for us to go ahead and have that event. So it really depends on the type of event.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Ms. Laura, will you be going into your slide of $418,000 higher in revenue and how that's going to happen with everything else going on? That would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is basically, we're looking at just the convention center now, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I think.
So in regards to the 418,000, how we're going out, that is compared to the the forecast for this current budget year. So obviously this budget year has been impacted because of COVID-19. The good news is that for the sports center, for example, which we'll talk about that later, but the convention center, all the way through, say, the second to third week of March, so when everything really started shutting down, that was our busy time. The end of March, April was somewhat busy. July and August and May, July, and August are our slowest months of the entire year. So as far as timing, it worked out pretty well. If it had been later on, it would have had a bigger impact in regards to that. So a lot of that business that was at the end of March, in April, May, and even June, majority of them are looking at postponing. Some of them had to cancel altogether, but a lot of them are local nonprofits. They depend on that money for fundraising. Weddings, for example, they want to still have their wedding. A lot of them are just postponing to the fall. So that's where you'll see that increase. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I guess short of moving to Georgia, we are where we are, right?
Yeah, and I mean, Laura and her staff have done a really great job. We looked at all the potential revenues or all the potential events that were lost, and the far majority of them were postponed rather than canceled, which is great, and some of the ones that just continue to push off. So if you look at potential total lost revenues with them, and it's digging way deep into the trenches with it, but they've done a great job of doing that, recapturing them and pushing them off as opposed to just canceling them and losing them. So they're trending better than what most of those public assembly facilities, not just in the Commonwealth, but around the whole region, are doing because of their flexibility and just being able to work with them on it and still trying to realize a lot of that.
Well, in essence, the community's been wanting stuff after Friday after 5.
Right.
Trying to continue to have that activity downtown, and this just may give us an opportunity to see what we can do for
Sure.
the fall. And
Sure. And some of the events, like we talked about, and I know you have a lot more budget things to go over, but things like July 4th, Friday after, Convention Center has done so many things with their 4th Fest. That probably wouldn't happen whenever we do a 4th of July, because it's a whole bunch of, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids climbing around in the same inflatables and slides. That just won't fit right now in the current mold. So even if we did July 4, and even if they do live music or whatever it is, it's going to look different than what people were used to this past fall and this past summer. But like you had said, a lot of people are wanting to get out and do something, just do anything.
Yeah.
And so again, we've got some ideas. We're just waiting on, we don't want to get too far in front of what the state level and what Clay and his department are comfortable with doing and easing up. And they want to continue to see those numbers over the next few weeks. And if it continues in the same direction, we'll be ready to pull the trigger pretty quick and get some things out there.
yeah, having enough contact tracing is going to be the secret to the rest of this year.
Yeah, certainly.
Because as the more they test these folks, they're going to have a lot more people for contact tracing, and that's going to be the indicator when it starts leveling off. And
Sure.
So I think we're positioned pretty well.
We are, and like I said, once it does come back, I think it'll be pretty significant.
They got that walking thing. Have you seen that in those bars in Chicago and places?
Oh,
Donuts.
This big inner tube, and they're
Yeah.
standing down in it, and they're walking around in the bars and at the restaurants and everything. They got this 6-foot inner tube.
Looks like something should be at a resort down in Cancun rather than a bar in
it's-
Chicago.
It's awesome. What a thinker.
yeah.
Okay, thank you,
Yep.
ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Laura and Tim. Up next is Community Development Director Abby Shelton.
afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to present the proposed budget for the Community Development Department. In this year's budget, you will see a total increase of $40,000, or roughly 17%. There is an increase in personnel costs, the majority of which is accounted for by the addition of one full-time staff member. And it is anticipated that this person will be hired, as City Manager said, midway through our budget season. Supplies have also increased due to the addition of memberships to the American Planning Association and National Association of Housing and Redevelopment Officials, while we will also maintain our membership to the National Community Development Association. You will see a 19% decrease in the other category as the new NRSA document has been completed and less professional and technical services will be necessary. The training costs also decreased 72% due to the additional membership subscriptions, which will allow staff to do online trainings as well as have access to valuable databases. So this year we've been diligently working on closing down the Triplet Twist district programming. We have completed a total of 28 existing homeowner exterior rehabilitation program projects, with 11 more that will be completed in the coming months. We've built a total of 4 new homes within the district that have been sold to low to moderate income qualifying families. We have completed a total of 14 business facade repairs, with 2 more to complete. The largest of these projects has by far been Gabe's Shopping Center, which is still in progress. This project will be completed this calendar year, and with the new facade, as well as the removal of Gabe's Tower, thank you, these projects will have a positive impact on the neighborhood. We completed the downspout removal program partnership with the Regional Water Resource Agency, which disconnected 120 active downspouts, saving an estimated 800,000 gallons from entering the sewer system. Ultimately, this has helped minimize local flooding, particularly in the fairgrounds area, which has been a trouble spot for a long time. The total public investment for this neighborhood revitalization strategy area is $3.2 million. The private sector has invested $11.7 million, which has been either through investment in or purchase of properties within the NRSA or through match from the CDBG facade grants. This combined total is well over the anticipated investment of $4.7 million total. Staff has also been ramping up for the Northwest Neighborhood Revitalization Strategy area, which will extend from Walnut Street on the east to Ewing on the west, with the river as the northern boundary, of course, only including the city limits. Can you still hear me? Okay. And the north side of 5th Street. The new plans have been submitted and are awaiting HUD approval. In the meantime, we are working on guidelines for the following programs: exterior rental rehab, existing homeowner exterior rehab, downspout removal, commercial facade rehab, down payment assistance, and homebuyer education. In addition to these programs, we will be completing various safety and beautification projects within the Northwest NRSA, including but not limited to sidewalks, bus shelters, landscaping, and street lighting. We anticipate a total investment of $7.4 million in this area. Our yearly formula entitlement funding will provide $499,972 in CDBG funds and $266,184 in home funds. The city also received an additional $294,117 in CDBG funds through the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, or CARES Act. To date, with the amazing help of the Finance and Administration departments, we have processed and approved 77 rental assistance applications and 30 small business applications, which will be funded through the CARES Act funds that will be administered through HUD. Of the CARES Act funding, $119,844 have been committed between these two programs. We have 88 rental applications left to process. In addition to all of these programs, we continue to enjoy a strong partnership with Habitat for Humanity, as well as the Owensboro Area Affordable Housing Solutions, CHODO, or a community housing development organization. We will be completing at least 6 more homes for low-income single families within the next year between these two organizations alone. Our community is blessed to have these agencies, as well as the other social services, entire social services community. Mayor and Commissioners, that's my presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay, the elephant in the room, what are we going to do with the senior center? That 86-page document that for the RFXYZ,
the RFP.
whatever, has there been any discussions on how to bring possible developers together to see if there's what they actually, I don't know what to say, what they feel like they can do within the constraints of the revenue that is available? Or, I mean, your job, I'm just asking because I got through page 3 and I said, there's no chance I'm reading this sucker. So, and that's can be a huge part of this revitalization, couldn't it?
Yeah, we've been looking at options. I've spoken to a couple developers. I've gotten some feedback from the people that did not submit any proposals. And one of the biggest hindrances is the fact that I guess they didn't understand that we could apply for the historic side of it for them to be able to get tax credit dollars. So that is one thing, if we do apply for a historic accreditation for that building and go ahead and take care of it and then offer just that portion up to do low-income housing. Now, the other side of it was that they just couldn't make the numbers work to build a new facility.
So you're saying you're leaning towards trying to salvage it and make it better?
No.
Okay.
No. We're looking at some other options for the senior center at this point.
I know that's a mess. Okay, I just was curious how it fed into this whole thing. Anybody else?
No longer a group of one,
Just for a little bit longer.
just for a little bit.
Okay, any other questions for Abby? Ms. Shelton, I mean. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Who's watching them urchins right now? You got them out to jail?
Pretty much. That's where we're at. Thank you.
Okay, next is the fire department, and Chief Howard is on his way.
Must be donuts in the other room or something.
Where'd he go? Be pleased.
Huh?
I'd be pleased.
Well, they're all in there, I think. I saw him walking around back there. He's social distancing himself.
Dang it.
He's always prepared. Very thorough.
Has he got any clip notes with the clip
Oh,
notes?
my
with
God.
Hello.
Hi.
We appreciate your report. Thank you. Oh, you hadn't started yet.
Somewhere else.
You the man.
Oh, yeah. I don't hear that enough, actually. It's good. Without further ado, first of all, it's good to see everybody. Honorable Mayor
That
and
mic a little
Commissioners.
closer to you, Chief. Move the mic closer to you.
Oh, got it.
There we
Okay.
go.
Got it.
Thank you.
Honorable Mayor and Commissioners, it's definitely good to see you all healthy and gathered here to do the people's business. Hope your families are as doing as well as you guys look like you're doing, guys and ladies, of course. Thank you for the opportunity to present the Owensboro Fire Department 2021 budget here today. I'm proud to come to you today as the leader of a dynamic organization that strives every day to live up to our mission to save lives and protect property. As you know, the past 2 months have demonstrated for all of us, I feel like, the resilience of the Owensboro Fire Department, the city of Owensboro, and of our citizens. Our organizational chart that you can see on this slide shows a clearly defined chain of command that emphasizes delegation to maximize the delivery of emergency services here in Owensboro and beyond. Fully staffed, our department has 102 personnel positions. That includes 99 uniformed state-certified firefighters, of which I'm one, an essential administrative aide, and 2 part-time inspectors. There are currently 4 entry-level openings within our department, and anyone who's interested in applying still has until the end of this month to do so. The process for filling personnel openings has been delayed, of course, by recent and current realities surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic, of course. As you know, we run emergency units out of 5 stations that are strategically located throughout Owensboro. Additionally, we administer emergency service training and public education at our training facility on Davis Street. We respond to nearly 8,200 calls for service each year, with about 3/4 of those being EMS related. Emergency response is a significant and highly visible part of how we go about executing our mission. Draw your attention to this next slide. Response is only one piece of the puzzle for us, however, because what we do also for our mission includes prevention and personnel development, otherwise known as training. Each of these pieces are important investments for our community as we look to improve the quality of life for our citizens by making Owensboro an even safer place to live, grow, and do business. Here are the numbers. Let's look at the numbers for the coming budget year. I'm proposing a budget of $12,170,725. That is a 5% increase over that of the current fiscal year. This overall increase is better understood by breaking down the 6 categories of expenditure that make up the budget. Personnel costs, which are a big part of it, they constitute about 83% of our fiscal year 21 budget, which is consistent as a portion of the budget from what's in the current budget year. Increased insurance and pension costs are significant, obviously, for all the departments, and that hits the fire department as well. Along with those costs, we've requested additional monies for overtime budget to cover the cost of off-duty personnel working special events and participating in training events that we have lined up throughout the next year. The next line, maintenance. Maintenance costs are holding steady from year to year with a 1% increase in the proposed budget. And I feel like that's pretty remarkable when you consider the equipment that's necessary to do our work in the fire department. Supply costs are actually down 10% in this proposal. And a big part of that, the cut in price, there was a radio replacement plan that was costing about $38,500 a year, and 1920 was actually the last year of that. So we will have to do something into the future with radios, but we're through with that plan and we're in a good place. Utilities are projected to increase in cost by a modest 3% in the coming budget year. And obviously, that's purely based on projections. We have to see where the costs actually go. You see down towards the bottom, other. Other is a broad category, obviously, by the nature of the word. In our budget, that includes vital subcategories for us, such as safety costs as well as training. This part of our budget is proposed to increase by 15% in fiscal year 21. That increase is due primarily to big plans that we have for beefing up our rescue response capability with collapse rescue and water rescue training planned over the course of this next year. Down on the bottom, last but not least on here is the capital expense. The capital expenses for the Owensboro Fire Department for the coming budget year are proposed to increase by 21%. About 2/3 of that increase is actually additional funding for the capital replacement plan. The other third of it is the rising cost of capital expenses for new equipment that we would like to buy over the course of the next year. And a couple big ticket items would be the 2 cardiac monitors that we want to buy to help us to go from basic life support to advanced life support in our responses. The next couple of slides show some highlights of the investment that we seek to make in our people, our facilities, equipment, and programs over the next year. The leadership transition at the Owensboro Fire Department that started when Chief Mitchell retired late last year actually is still continuing, even with promotional testing that's taking place today, as a matter of fact. But it's a transition that isn't just a matter of promoting people, it's about supporting and developing the folks that we do promote and strengthening a viable pipeline for future fire officers to emerge from our lower ranks. We look forward also to developing an updated strategic plan for our department that integrates advanced life support into our model of service delivery. That's a big deal to us and will be for the community. We're excited about maximizing the benefit of our upcoming accreditation process. It'll guide us in continuous improvement through performance measurement, and the process will also help us to update our community risk assessment that'll help us determine the level of resources and deployment necessary to keep our community safe. Some more highlights that I have here. Design work is beginning on the remodel for Station 2 that's located at 1900 East Parish Avenue. And you can expect to see construction taking place there in the next few months. So we're pretty excited about that. Okay, that's the last one. After recently working to contract with a consulting firm to do a gap analysis for our training center, they're finally getting ready to start work, and we should have that study completed by late summer or early fall. And it's going to give us a strong direction to go in and some advice to make the smartest investments that we can in our training center, to bring that facility up to date, and to give our personnel the learning environment that they deserve to attain the skills necessary to keep them safe while they go about the job of keeping the public safe. One piece of capital equipment in our proposed budget is a new notification system at Station 1, the station that's located at 512 West 9th Street. It's new technology, brings us up into the 21st century. It'll help to improve safety in the station, provide better access to information for decision-making, for emergency response, and also improve performance with strategically placed turnout time clocks in the stations. Further, this proposed budget will give us the opportunity to increase our water rescue capability. Prioritizing water rescue in this budget makes us better stewards of our stretch of the Ohio River. It makes us better prepared when planning and hosting events on the water, such as the air show or the upcoming hydroplane races. Lastly, we plan to start upgrading our extrication equipment in the coming year so our rescuers can cut through the strongest metals used in the newer cars much faster than some of our current equipment. Okay, I've already said a lot, obviously, in the last few minutes, but I understand some of you may have further questions, comments, or concerns about the fire department budget, so I'll do my best to answer any line of inquiry that you have for me.
Good job, Chief.
Really? Well, thanks. I mean, it's really good to see you guys, honestly.
Thank you.
Good to see this guy, too. I don't really get to see him anymore either.
Golly, man, don't kiss up too bad now.
I'm not the type.
Glad to see him.
Thank you, Chief.
I like this guy. You guys stay safe.
Take care.
Thank you. Okay, up next is Finance and Support Services with Director Angela Hamrick.
Yes, Mayor and Commission. I'll be short and sweet here. I oversee and have responsibility for 4 areas with a total full-time staff of 37 and non-full-time staff of 10. And those areas are broken down as follows. Our human resources is run by our human resources manager, Josh Bachmeyer. Information technology, or IT, is run by our IT manager, Angela Bruner. Our geographic information systems, or GIS, is run by our GIS manager, Will Carpenter. In finance is run by our deputy director of finance and support services, Danae Galloway. Each one of them will be presenting their budget, and I now turn it over to Josh Bachmeyer.
Afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners.
Hello, Josh.
How are y'all doing? Good.
Thank you for your report.
I'll be quick, I promise.
No, just kidding. Just
I
kidding.
know. So I'm Josh Bach. HR is pretty boring sometimes.
No, it
but-
isn't, man. Most businesses are survivals nowadays because of great HR.
It has
There's
been,
no question about it.
it's been a struggle over the last 2 months, but we're making.
I'm telling you, if you don't have a good HR guy, you're in trouble, or gal.
Just to introduce myself, I guess for the camera, I'm Josh Bachmeyer, the HR manager for the city. So I'll be presenting the personnel department budget for fiscal year 2021. Mayor, you did have a question you brought up earlier. I'll answer, I guess for Wayne maybe, but the bus drivers that Nate alluded to, we swapped 6 non-full-time bus driver positions that are difficult to fill for 1 full-time position. Obviously not as difficult to fill, just with the benefits that come along with that full-time position, and we do offer those to non-full-time staff that we currently have. And then also when we run the recruitment, they're able to apply as well. So just to answer that.
Thank you.
Among the various shared budget factor increases that have already been elaborated on, I'll just point out several notable mentions for our budget. The majority of our personnel services increase is due to the schedule step and COLA increases for staff. A small increase, I'm requesting a 50-cent per hour increase for one of our part-time clerks that has been with us for over 12 years, which is tough to do for a non-full-time position. We are very fortunate to have her. And also requesting that the personnel secretary position be converted to administrative aide. It's less than a couple $100 increase, but it's a classification change. So it's a higher grade, but she backs down in steps. So supplies, we have just a small reduction in our technical supplies category. I guess the label can be kind of confusing, but these technical supplies are basically for our loss prevention manager / occupational nurse. So these are all, they include her medical equipment, and they also include DOT drug screens and random drug screens. And basically it's just based flu shots, basically just based on the need and our current supply. And then utilities, the OMU estimated cost for electric would increase marginally, and then I believe there's a sewer charge that has a 3% inflation factor, which Nate mentioned earlier is kind of a wash, but it is an effect on our budget. One other notable mention that's not on the slide, but I would like to point out, if you recall, the city completely alleviated tuition reimbursement back in 17-18 due to budget constraints. So in 1920, we added $10,000. We will likely get through most of that this year, and we're requesting an additional $2,000 to increase that to 12. And I'm pretty confident we'll go through all of that next year. And again, that's just reimbursement for if they take any classes, and if they get a B or higher, it's reimbursed at 50%, and then C would be 25%. So. We're requesting that for 1920 or 2021, but the rest of the budget is pretty much unchanged. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you. That's not science anymore. They've disavowed that. That's, oh, God, I get to hear her talk. I've never heard her talk.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
Welcome. I'd like here to present the IT budget for the fiscal year 2021.
Can you pull that mic to you just a little more,
More?
please? You're so, it's such a, thank you.
See, is that better?
That's better.
All right. Our proposed budget is up 26% this year. Our budget is $2,454,000. The major increase for this huge increase is we have moved the radio communication has transferred from police department to IT. So that accounts for the majority of the 26% increase is in absorbing that division into IT.
So why did you do that?
Almost necessarily my decision, but I think the decision. I'll be honest. No, the decision.
Turnover.
Turnover.
Just turnover. Okay.
Yeah, and radio is more digital today than what it has been in the past, so it makes more sense that digital would land under IT instead of police at this point. So that was why it was moved there. So that accounts for a large portion of every category that you're going to see in my budget. For personnel, it is up to 16% for $209,000 increase, and that is due to the additional 2 radio technicians that will reside under the radio division. Maintenance is up $179,000. A large portion of this is partly the radio as well, but we do have a couple of software items. One software item, we only pay the subscription every 3 years. We get a discount when we pay it for 3 years at a time, so we take it every 3 years and pay that there. So that is one of the increases there. Another increase is that our time and attendance system we have hosted on site, but our vendor that we use for that system is requiring us to convert to a hosted system with them. So that is a larger dollar increase for a hosted system than what we were able to pay on site. Our other costs are up $107,000, or 107%, $185,000. A lot of this is one item that we have not done in the past that I have in the budget is we have one room downstairs where it is our core switch resides. If that core switch goes down, you're all down except for City Hall. We're the only ones that are not tied to that room specifically, but every other facility would be down. There is no fire suppression in that room. So we do have a $20,000 in there to put fire suppression in that room to make sure that we can keep everyone operational. We also are replacing pretty much our entire data center equipment this year. It was under a 5-year lease. So we are doing another 5-year lease with that equipment. A little bit of an increase there for a portion of that over time. We also have an increase for training for the new radio technicians, realizing that the individuals we had in those positions have been with the city for over 10 years, some longer than that we are probably going to have to hire and get someone up to speed. Our capital costs are down 88%, which for $1,000. Last year, we did a major upgrade on our imaging system, so we are not doing any major capital increases this year, so those are down. That concludes my presentation. questions?
Personal question, how come my phone won't send email when I get here? I have to get off and get on some free thing.
It is just how it is configured with the, your password protected and all that. So, I do the same thing with mine.
Okay.
I automatically
I just
connect
thought you
to
was
City
picking on
Free.
me.
I had that same issue as well. It's in how the security is set up for that to go out.
Okay, I just thought you was picking on me.
No, I do the same thing. I don't pick on you.
Kind of weird, though.
All of us, yeah.
Yeah, it is. We've made some changes that we thought would correct it at one time and
So it's no big deal.
didn't pan out the way we thought it would, so.
Anybody else?
Thanks.
Most of us don't know enough to ask you a question, to be honest with you. Here comes Ratchet Jaw.
Six feet.
6 feet.
Oh. Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
¿Sabes quién es ese señor?
Estoy bien.
Si usted es bueno, levanta la mano. Muy bien, ¿y tú?
Sí, muy bien. Mayor, Commissioners, I'm Will Carpenter. I'm the GIS manager for the city and for the consortium, which includes OMU, RWRA, and Fiscal Court. As you can see, my budget has gone up about 5%. The bulk of that would be through the increase in insurance and increase in pension. There has been a decrease in, and that was the personnel increase, the decrease in the other category, the large one, which is down 34%. That's due to cancellation of training that was scheduled due to the COVID-19. We'll see if we have an opportunity to reschedule that down the road. And then the other is there's an increase in the supplies, and that's due to scheduled replacement of desktop computers, a single desktop computer. We're a fairly small department, so it makes a large percentage increase when we just replace one unit. The other thing I'd like to say is that we're closely working with Central Dispatch and the rest of the IT department in migrating to the new Tyler Central Dispatching software. The new system is going to use the GIS data as its primary mechanism for identifying where the call is and the logic of what units should be routed. So while the GIS data has always been, we've been working to make it exceptionally good, it's going to move from a supporting role to a primary role when we move to the new system. So we're working closely with 911 to make sure that we have a flawless transition. And with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
How would you say technologically your GIS informational system is? Is it pretty well up to date to what's out there?
Absolutely, absolutely. We have one of the finest in the state.
Okay.
And if you were to compare us per capita, I would put our data against anybody in the state.
That boy cigar.
And as
Yes,
he referenced earlier, against the partnership between the city, the county, OMU, and RWA, where we all contribute equally, and so we actually are able to get probably more resources by pooling our assets. And so they're housed here. I think it's Will and two other gentlemen, so a department of three, who work for all four of those agencies, but we all contribute equally. But they're housed here, and so I think it pays dividends to all of us to contribute and share those services.
Economies of scale.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we can cut the overhead by 75% doing it that way.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Commissioner, go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Just a quick question. Is the city boundaries maps on the City of Owensboro's website?
Yes, sir.
Sometimes, I guess when I try to go look for it, sometimes people just don't know how there are pockets of non-city residents out there. And every time I tell people that, they go, no, it's not. I said, look at the map. I'll show you.
Yes, sir. It is a complicated situation, and it becomes most apparent when we dispatch we dispatch emergency services, where time is of the essence, and yet, depending on which side of the street, it may be a city response, it may be a county response, and it matters that we get it right.
You have some businesses that are half in the city and half in the county.
I wasn't going to bring that up, Mayor, but you are correct.
It's really
I
important.
mean, it's just
You have to ask if the problem's in the front or the back of the shop. No, we don't.
Oh, jeez.
Which door? Well, thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate you.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners.
Hello.
For those of you who do not know me, I'm Danae Galloway, Deputy Director of Finance and Support Services for the City of Owensboro. I'm going to talk a little bit about finance's budget. Our full budget for the year, our request is $1.793 million. It's an overall 5% increase, or $86,000. Personnel is up 5%, and as Nate spoke of earlier, it's mainly driven by COLA, step increase to health insurance cost and retirement. Utilities are up 15%. That is driven by OMU's increase to electrical and sewer cost. The other category in finance is up about 6%, and that is mainly due to increased cost for the property tax roll that we receive from the county. My finance budget is mainly driven by personnel cost. That's the biggest chunk of it. I have an incredible staff. I would put my finance staff up against any staff in the state of Kentucky or across the nation. My staff supports the other city departments, the citizens of Owensboro, and most importantly, probably each other. And I'm very blessed and fortunate to have the staff that I have and to work with all the employees of the city of Owensboro. Thank you. And I'll answer any questions that you might have.
Finance, you're out of my league, so they just work harder than anybody. I'm telling you what. Before I leave here, I'm going to try and see if I can be the last car off that parking lot. There's this white car that's always there, no matter what time I leave. And when I say goodbye every time, 6 o'clock, whatever it is, worker bee's in there going after it. So I appreciate all you do, and I know everybody else does as well.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Just, if I could, Mayor. Danae, with all of everything we did with the COVID-19 relief funds, the administration of that, the phone calls you took, the emails you addressed, trying to calm the nerves and the stress of everybody that was being done in the last 3 weeks, I got some of them too. I know what they went through, and they did it very professional. I don't believe they demeaned anybody. They treated them all with respect. So tell the ladies, awesome job. They administered it really well.
I had staff down there that assisted with the community development side. I also had staff that assisted with the city side. They did filter a lot of phone calls, answer a lot of questions, give a lot of guidance, and they were excellent. And I'm like I said, my staff is
Yes.
incredible.
So keep them.
Try my best.
Okay. Who's next?
Okay, next is the police department, and
This guy don't need no mask, does he? Oh, Lord.
Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Commissioners, Madam Commissioner, Art Elam with the Owensboro Police Department. I'll talk to you about our org chart first. Total, we have 172 positions. 3 of those are unfunded positions, 1 being a traffic citation officer and 2 dispatchers. 2 part-time dispatch positions. I'm sorry. Unfunded means that the positions are actually on the book, but we don't budget any funds for them.
Oh, you ain't got anybody.
Right.
Nobody giving parking tickets, is that what
So
you're saying?
1 traffic, no, we have 1.
1.
But we have 2 positions.
I see.
Yeah.
Short 2.
Right, and then the other are 2 full-time dispatch positions that are unfunded. So, of those 172, 111 are full-time sworn positions. As mentioned earlier, one of those will be a replacement position for the middle school SRO. We have 7 part-time reserve positions. We have 9 full-time police-related civilian staff, 7 part-time civilian staff for police, and then central dispatch, if you count the director, Paul Nave, who will be up after me. We have 30 full-time central dispatch positions, and 2 of those are unfunded. Yes, sir. We also have 8 part-time call takers in central dispatch. If you look at this slide here, the police department's budget is $14,703,533, of which we saw a 4% increase, as has been alluded to by several others before me. That's due to increases in our cost of living increase, insurance, just general personnel cost. There was also an increase in our utilities, 43%, which is $35,881, largely due to we have transitioned from MiFis, and what happened with COVID, we had a number of MiFis that officers had to come to station and check out in order to access KY Ops and all the utilities that they use for work. Everything's done electronically.
Wi-Fi is like the internet access in the vehicles, right?
Yes, internet access. So we saw an opportunity to get what we call PEP Link routers that are mounted in each vehicle, so that in situations like a pandemic, officers don't have to report to station. They can access the internet and do all their reports from afar. And the beauty of it, it's more robust, and it's in every vehicle, so no matter where the officer is, he has access, or she has access to the internet. As you all know, we have a number of in-dash car camera systems, and they actually upload video onto the server to be stored, so that can be done versus out in the field versus having to come to the police station or hit one of the access points in the city. So true benefit. Well, COVID highlighted our weakness.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah, it was efficient, but it was a little difficult at times, because we had so many, and we get memberships or subscriptions to like AT&T or what have you. And, it's okay in a perfect world, but when the world crashes on you like the pandemic, you realize that, hey, now you have to have these person-to-person exchanges with members of the police department that, further exposes each officer daily to additional risk. So this would be a huge benefit for us. Our capital expense account went down 3%. That was due to last year, if you all recall, we purchased a Trimble Reveal scanner, a 3D scanner that could be placed at a scene of an accident or at the scene of a crime, and it actually plots every piece of evidence in a residence or whatever part of a vehicle you see out in the field, waterways, what have you. So technology is a wonderful thing. And fortunately for us, we were able to get it last year, and this year we did not need that. However, we are getting 12 custom signal cameras, which eliminates all of the obsolete cameras that we currently have. So it's taken a long time to get to this point, but it's outstanding because we were still using cameras that required DVDs. Now everything is connected via internet, and it uploads via the server. So this will be a huge advantage for the police department and the community, collecting evidence, marking evidence, and they have we have retention requirements that we have to meet, so we can set audio and video up for a time to purge itself if it's not marked as evidence. We also are looking at, due to some changes with some Supreme Court decisions last year that said we couldn't physically go out and mark tires for parking ticket fines and such. So we found a solution, a Brazos e-chalk, which actually will integrate with our Tyler system. And once we get that worked out, we'll make that purchase if approved by you all, so that our sole traffic citation officer can get back to doing her job without touching vehicles. It'll, mark the tags and such. Go ahead, Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you, Chief. How's that going to work? What are they going to be doing with that? I just found that interesting, that this new device is not going to be breaking the Constitution that was just announced. So
Well, the constitutionality issue was the fact that officers had to go up and touch the vehicle. So with the digital, they'll be she'll carry a handheld device and just go up and take a picture or scan the license plate. All the information is loaded into the system. She can come back and check it and generate a parking citation from there.
Thank you, Chief.
We also have in the budget a Matrix 210 V2 drone with thermal imaging and payload drop, which we have a smaller drone that doesn't have the same functionality, and we learned that really quick. But the smaller drones are great for training purposes because this unit here is 29,000 plus, and to crash that or lose that would be outrageous. But the training drones that we have, they work, they serve a purpose, but this particular model here, you can actually do multiple things at one time. And that is, if you fly over someone, if you're looking for a person, you can actually call out to them and talk back and forth. You can also cast light on them and see that. They have floodlight capabilities, thermal imaging. The ones that we have for practice, they can only do one function at a time. So if it was dark, you couldn't talk. You could shine a light, but you couldn't talk to them. You couldn't take pictures, you couldn't do anything. So with that, as we've advanced, we've had a number of people, I think 9 officers that took the test with the FAA, and they all passed. So, and it is a very, very difficult test. A lot of information. It's almost like you want to become a pilot. So they fortunately were willing to go through that training and to take that role on. So we're blessed to have them.
How big is the drone?
Huh?
How big is that drone?
This particular drone here, it's probably about that big. And it could actually, the payload drop, it can carry a radio or a drop phone that we would use in a crisis negotiation type situation and drop it off. And so someone could actually, officers can make contact with a barricaded subject or someone that's lost or what have you.
You better keep hiring young people. That's all I can tell you with all this technology.
Mr. Mayor, I'm telling you, 55 to 60% of our officers right now have less than 5 years experience with the Owensboro Police
I'll be
Department.
darned.
So I don't think we have a problem hiring young people. We are very, very young. It's us old dogs that you have to worry about trying to retain.
I'm just talking about technology, man. They've raised in it, you know.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
That's great.
But with that being said, I'll take any questions if you have them.
How many canines do you have?
Currently, we have 3.
They all German Shepherds?
All German Shepherds. 2 of which we just acquired. They came in right before COVID. They came in from the Netherlands, and
Really?
yeah, the trainer handler flew them to us and trained with our officers for 2 weeks. They were fully trained dogs, so, and they've done an outstanding job. And I'll touch on this real quick. Day 1, when the officer was out with the canine by himself, we got a call to assist Ohio County, where they were looking for a suspect in reference to a rape that occurred in the woods. Had no idea where it happened or whatever. They called our dog. Our officer goes and with the canine goes through the woods, finds every article of clothing that was stripped off of this young lady, tracked back to the location where everything happened, found a 4-wheeler and the trailer, and outstanding job. Money well spent.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome.
Did you sick him on the guy?
No.
No.
Any additional questions?
Thank you,
If
Chief.
you have no questions, I'll call Paul Nave, the Director of Central Dispatch.
Thanks for all you do, Chief.
The last 2 times it was break time when I came up, right?
Well, the city manager now is younger.
Oh, so Commissioner, Mayor, thank you for my opportunity. My budget is 29% in the negative.
Speaking of Mike, please.
$1.2 million less than last year. The crux of it is the maintenance and the cost of the CAD system, GIS, MDT system is taken out of this year's budget. It was appropriated last year and encumbered, so those monies are no longer in my budget, and that's the deficit of 29%. Personnel is up 12% due to the personnel cost attributed. Maintenance is up 14%, and that's directly due to the maintenance for the CAD system. Supplies are down 47%, and that's items that we no longer needed that we purchased last year. And so a total of 95% capital of $1,015,967, and that's specifically for the CAD project that was taken out of the budget. Any questions?
Paul, I appreciate everything you do. Everybody that's sitting there, all the phone calls they've received over the last 60 days.
It's been rough some days.
I can only imagine. So tell everybody that's behind that microphone, they're the first one everybody sees whenever they're nervous. It makes a difference.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
So the article in the paper about the COVID response and, identifying someone, how are we working through that? Is there going to be a invasion of their personal privacy to be able to make I think it's a perfectly sensible thing you need to know. So are there going to be issues with that, or you got that all ironed out? I didn't get enough out of the newspaper article to really understand.
So we're in the guidelines of the state government that's given the guidelines to Green River Health Department, and we're going by those guidelines. So based on the information we're receiving, we're within the law of giving the information. So there's no personal information given out, no names, sex, race, any of that information. All we have is a specific address. So when we give an address out, we just let the first responders know in a way that it's not known that it's a COVID quarantine location, that it is a quarantine location, that they need to use PPE equipment going to that location. Just be another avenue of caution going there. So
and how long did it take to institute that? That didn't come out right off the bat, did it, as part of the guidelines?
About 2 weeks in.
2 weeks?
Into
okay.
And then as soon as we know that the case has been unquarantined, if you will, then it's taken out, so we don't keep anything in our system. And nothing's released to anyone, to any of the first responders, unless you're responding to that address.
Okay, thank you for clarification there, because really didn't go into that depth on that. Anybody else?
My pleasure.
Good job.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
And while Amanda comes, I'll just remind the commission, I know you know this, but dispatch is kind of like GIS a minute ago, where it's shared. It's a city-county service, and so employees are housed here, but the cost is shared proportionally between the city and the county based on a proportional share of emergency calls. So it's basically a 3-year running contract. So we look back at the previous 3 years.
Okay.
So then we split those costs based on who receives the emergency calls. And so I know on the most recent contract, the city share went from 75 to 72%, 73, 77 to 73. 73. So our proportional share decreased because our proportion of calls went down. So, but it is a good service, again, where the city and the county work together, and we save money combined and provide a uniform and consistent service to the community.
So it's strictly per call and not population?
It's per call, that's right.
That's correct.
Yep, calls are their workload, essentially.
All right.
One other comment, if I could, Mayor. Paul, just curious. It is a combined central dispatch with city and county, Davis County and Owensboro. Has there been any consideration of expanding your service area?
Of course, regionalization is the future for 911. It's going to be there. I suspect that in the next 5 to 10 years, you'll see a regionalization come into play, because you can do more with less.
Yes.
And that's the objective, that you can receive more calls with less people, if you will, by consolidating and making it more efficient. And so you're not investing in a 911 piece of equipment for this building, for that location, for this location. So you're reducing cost, and you're doing more with less cost.
Yeah, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong. I know in particular in some of the smaller, more rural counties, that is happening as well, and sometimes even in partnership with the state police.
Right.
They're going with the state police for a regional dispatch approach.
So how long have you been with 911?
A good while, close to 30 years.
30 years?
Yes, sir.
Wow.
Yeah, and Paul he would never tell you this, but he's very well known and well respected across the state as being one of the pioneers at this and being really a leader at the state level in what he does.
The governors are giving me to a board, so now I'm in charge of the GIS for the whole state. So I'm on a committee to help.
Is that another job with no more money?
No, no more money.
Yeah, I know about, I'm well aware of those jobs.
No more money.
Appreciate you having us in you in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you.
It's like a barber shop. Next.
That's right. Next is Parks.
Barbershops.
I need one. I know. Sound like my wife. I've texted the lady who cuts my hair, but I guess I'm not very high on the priority scale. I'm learning. So much like being at home, you know. Next, Park and Recreation.
Those dog grooming places, they've been open for a couple of weeks.
I know. Up next is Parks and Recreation with Director Amanda Rogers.
Speaking of dog parks.
Well, hello, Mayor and Commissioners. Hope you're having a good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to brief my budget. The slide you see in front of you, can you go back one for me with our org chart? Thank you. Is our organization. We have 15 full-time staff and 175 part-time, or what we call intermittent employees. Those 175 employees are our primary workload. They do the primary workload throughout our department. On our slide there, you can see that some things are yellow and some are blue. We operate our budget from the general fund in yellow and enterprise fund for recreation in blue. So that's why they're differentiated differently there. My team manages 960 acres of city-owned property. We run 7 recreational businesses. We have a multitude of recreational opportunities for your citizens here in the city of Owensboro that include 35 sports fields, 56 sport courts, 32 miles of trails, 15 shelters, pavilions, and 14 playgrounds. We operate 18 annual or long-term facility use agreements with boards that operate youth sports leagues or programs within and at our facilities. And we rent about around 600 rentals a year at those locations. In addition, we help about 10,000 youth in our community participate in youth sports leagues, tournaments, and programs. And in the process of doing all that, we help support your local economy through sports and recreational tourism. So if we look at our budget, I talked about operating out of 2 funds. Our parks fund, that's in your general fund, and those areas are all the monies needed to basically operate our green space parks, amenities, and general programming. Those would be locations like the Atkinson Greenbelt Park, Smothers Park, Legion and Moreland, and many more. There's 26 that are funded within this budget. That budget is approximately $3.8 million, which is a 5% increase from the previous year. If you look how those increases are broken down, you can see we're pretty consistent with other departments in the city at that 5% increase in personnel, with pension increase costs, COLA, step increases, health insurance. Our maintenance increased 9%. Most of my maintenance costs are what we call an internal service transfer to the Public Works Division. So as their costs for employees go up, you'll see that internal transfer over to within my budget too. They do a lot of work for the park system. We couldn't operate the amazing park system we have without Wayne Shelton and his team. We work very closely with Wayne and Stephen. So as their numbers go up, that'll be reflected here. The other increase is based upon project work. So we have several small painting projects this upcoming year, and we have some increase in grounds work that'll be done this upcoming year. Our supplies decreased about $26,000, and that's primarily due to timing. We had to purchase some in the previous year that got rolled over, so you can see where those funds are represented there. Yeah, 26%, but it was $32,000. Yes, sir. So the other fund we operate out of is our recreation fund. Within that fund, the monies are housed to operate the Edge Ice Center, both pool locations, the complex at Jack C. Fisher Park, both golf courses, and the center court tennis facility. So when you look at all those wrapped up into that recreational enterprise fund, those total expenditures are just over $3 million, and that's down about 7%. And you can see that our costs and personnel went down kind of against the grain of that 5% increase. One of the reasons for that is we had a tenured seasoned employee, our maintenance worker, Tony Ringham, had determined and left us after well-earned time here with the city. So a large portion of that decrease is representative of the payout for his retirement. In addition, we have new employees that are on single health insurance coverage instead of family coverage, which decreases those costs as well. Our maintenance increased by about 11%, just over $32,000. Again, about 5% of that is that increase in costs across the line with personnel, but we also have about $15,000 worth of small projects at those multiple business locations, such as improving and repairing
the rubber flooring at the edge, some sound system repairs there as well. We have 3 painting projects at those facilities and some roof repairs at Ben Halls. And then our capital division decreased by 39%, which is a little bit deceiving because $285,000 of that was for the maintenance repairs for the building at Ben Halls. So that project is going to be completed this fall and winter. So those monies will be transferred over into the Your Community Vision Fund to get that project completed this fall and winter. So a few things I want to highlight that you'll see in the upcoming year in Parks and Rec here in the city of Owensboro is we'll be replacing Dugan Best Playground. All of our playgrounds are on a replacement cycle. Dugan Best was installed in 2001, so it is 19 years old. It is very heavily utilized, so it is time for that to be replaced. So we'll be doing that shortly after July. It'll probably be an August, September project. We are also making repairs on the senior tee boxes at Ben Halls, some bunker work, some drainage work, and we have 2 service bridges that we drive heavy equipment over that have some repairs that have to be done at that location. And then we will be completing phase 2 of the complex renovations at Jack C. Fisher Park. When we originally funded that project, it was a 3-phase project with the cost for the fields coming in under budget. We've been able to manipulate 3 phases into 2. We'll be getting that project done a year early and under budget, I'm glad to say. And then we'll also be completing the Ben Halls maintenance building, which I just spoke of. That is all I have to share with you today. Unless you have questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
I do. Oh, go ahead.
So, on the Jack Fisher Park, so when you finish phase 2 this time, then it's finished as far as?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
okay.
Yeah. We, right now, the majority of the work that's been completed is the synthetic infields are done. We have all new irrigation system on the infield and outfield. Improvements and increases to our parking in the front lot and the back lot, and a large portion of the signage throughout the facility, in addition to some upgrades to the ticketing entrance. So phase 2 will include some upgrades to our service entrance, where the staff enter and exit, where we enter and exit, drop off deliveries and heavy equipment. We're also going to be doing a playground install. And what is the maintenance building. Increasing the size of the maintenance building. We have more equipment within synthetic turf and no place to house that. So we're going to be increasing that building to be able to maintain that equipment, help it last a little longer for us.
Okay.
Thanks.
In your little book there, I'd like to know about the Edge Ice Rink and what we actually subsidize that.
Yeah, give me 1 second
Yeah.
to flip to that division. And I can tell you what we are looking at for this upcoming year.
Okay. And if it's less than it was last year. I should have given you a heads up, but.
Oh, that's
I
okay. It'll
didn't.
just take, if you can bear with me just a second to get there.
Yeah.
Well, my pages are, I don't have the newest set, unfortunately.
And maybe you can look up Ben Halls and Hillcrest while we're at it, Angela, and maybe
I don't have the
Worker bee.
newest set, so my page numbers are different. Yeah, that'd be great, if you don't mind.
$244,000. Okay. That's where I'm going with this. Yeah. Is that because of lack of employees? That's what I mean. So you're making money by not operating.
And I hate to say that, but the city does an amazing thing with our enterprise fund and our capital savings account.
Yeah.
Which creates a hurdle for me to overcome at the beginning of every year, in revenue. But it makes good sense for the city, in my opinion, in the long run, because if we need facility repairs, replacement of items, there's no unknown price for days every month, every 3 months, every 6 months, so on. I need $200,000 for replacement roof, I need $42,000 for equipment. So it's a smart move for the city because it makes the road good. But with that in mind, that does create a large, development for us.
Okay, and then how about Hillcrest? Thought it was like 80.
For 2021? Is that what you're asking for this budget that we're talking about now, the subsidy for Hillcrest?
Well, I mean, it's going to be close to what it was short last year, right? I mean, I'm just trying to get a general, because I think there's, okay, and Ben Hall's,
It's 628.
what'd you say, Danae?
628.
628, okay. This for next year, right. You know, the point being is hunting for COVID money to maybe subsidize some of this stuff. Is that a possibility?
As long as we can demonstrate that it's an increased expense to the city, we plan to go ahead and submit for that.
Okay.
But by example, and I've reached out specifically on the convention center example, and because it's a higher transfer from the general fund that reflects as an expense to subsidize them higher. So we do plan to submit for that,
Okay.
yes.
That's right.
And I always want to make reference to that Ben Hall's number comes from the fact that we swapped the land for where the Bluegrass Museum is and took over the park, which in essence was losing money then, and well, not losing money because I'm trying to talk like Nate's taught me. It's not coming out even. So I wanted to kind of look and see. I've always said, you know, we ought to try and inch up these fees to see if we could ever break even, but that's an impossibility. Probably going to run people off, but I think people should understand that parks aren't supposed to make money, so to speak, and we've got 6, 8, almost $1 million in those 3 event areas.
It's about 1.5 million transfer in for all the recreational facilities, and we have 7 of those recreational
Yeah.
businesses that we operate and subsidize.
So, final question. Fisher Park, no, Wayman Morris Park.
Okay.
Is there a chance we could name one of those fields after Houston Hogg?
I would think that there would be.
I mean, I haven't asked the commission, but, I mean, he's one of the first African Americans to play football in Southeastern Conference. He's a local guy, did a great job with a lot of children that, you know, he was just a hell of a guy, and he passed away. And I think we brought it up maybe a couple of years ago, and then I never did but I think it would be kind of a neat thing to think about, because you got 4 fields.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can make a fishing lake after him. I really don't care, but I think he needs to be recognized either somewhere, because he was a great, you know, I played with him against him at Davis when I was at OHS, and he played for Wayman. So
Yep.
I think the put together deal might be something kind of cool for he and his family.
I will look into that and get back with you.
Is everybody okay with that?
I'm good, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Question.
Yes, sir. Don't ask me.
Quick question about Ben Halls and Hillcrest. What kind of play are we seeing getting?
Crazy up.
It's amazing.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, it's, and I'll tell you, I think that's a big reason why our revenues are not as bad as I anticipated they would be. Not when I did our new subsidy request, I anticipated potentially golf courses were going to have to close. And if they did open, that they would be seeing the foot traffic. But our rounds are ahead of last year, and we've had a lot of rain. We've had rain 3 of the last 5 days, so, and that's just, and we're still getting a huge amount of play. So our revenues there and our foot traffic there has been excellent.
We hope that we can continue to hold on to some of that once this is gone. I do think that we'll see an increase after this, but it will step back a little.
On another note, do you have any idea when we can start playing baseball?
Well, there's some debates in the Parks and Recreation world about that. I've had some conversation with Clay Horton. But local play, meaning practices, will begin June the 15th or June the 21st. We've got to have some further discussion internally and with us in the county. We're trying to do things as consistently as we can with county government. Ross Lee and the judge have been very good to work with. But it looks like per the governor's mandate, they can do 10 and less with one coach in groups, multiple groups, potentially on a field, as long as you can do social distancing. So that looks like 10 kids 6 feet apart in the outfield waiting to shag balls, an infield group running a lesson. There's a lot of requirements. The leagues have to keep a log of who's there at what time on what day and with which coach. Parents have to drop kids off, stay in their vehicle. There's a whole lot that the local leagues are going to have to do to make this work.
My fear is that they'll just go to other states and play travel teams.
I totally know that that is occurring now. Yeah, we are seeing travel teams. Now, it clearly states no travel and no competition June 15th. June the 19th, it talks about increasing groups and multiple groups, indoor, outdoor, low touch. Everybody can practice basically June the 29th. But at that point, you can only do local competition. So basically, baseball and some other low touch indoor and outdoor sports could begin some competition June the 29th. But it clearly states in the guidelines basically no travel at that point.
Okay.
And it doesn't give us on when that will be let up. It just says effective June the 29th. So my estimation would be that would carry through at least through the month of July. So
Travel month.
all your state tournaments typically happen in June, July.
Laid off any of his staff up there.
Do you have Amanda, do you have an estimation on even the playgrounds or even the pools, or just a wild guess
Yeah,
what might be happening?
We put together a plan, kind of a Plan X based upon some dates with the information we have today, knowing that we're checking that information every day and assuming it may have to change at any given point. We're struggling with playgrounds a little bit about what's the best method and means to keep those sanitized. We won't have the manpower or the money really probably to clean those multiple times of the day. And when you look at the amount that it would take in labor hours to clean, that's a big task. So we're trying to work out. Stephen and I just spoke about this yesterday, Stephen Franklin. I've spoken to other parks directors to get what they're utilizing, what can we use that won't bleach out the slides, that won't bleach out the rubber surfacing, that won't do more damage than good. Do they really need to be clean? There's so many debates about this.
All the time that it's not livable on a hard surface.
And you've got UV rays, right, outdoors on the playground all day
there's
long, so.
Overload of information on that part, but there's more and more. I just saw a study from John Hopkins, and they poo-pooed the whole idea that it can live on a hard surface. I mean, we wipe down, in between our patients, we wipe down the whole place every time, but more and more, it's just.
So for playgrounds, we're looking at probably no later than July 1st. At that point, it's 50 or less in a group. So I would be very comfortable at that point opening up playgrounds. But we are looking to see if we could do that earlier.
Yeah, I don't know how you enforce it. I mean, you see these states
And-
that opened up and the pools over in Missouri and the beaches in Florida and California. I mean, you couldn't get a sheet of paper between some of those people. They're so close. So, I mean, it's a noble gesture, but, you know, if it's consumer driven and people are going to get out, it's impossible to enforce it. And everybody, what's this, the honor system when we were kids, you know?
Yes.
And it's an impossibility to enforce it. And all the statistics are .001 for children be infected, much less be a carrier. So it's beyond the, I don't see it happening, but I hate it for especially the kids that don't have anything else to do but get to come to the pool or come to the park.
Playground, that's right.
Playgrounds. And you know, a lot of kids have grown up in your parks playgrounds. So, I mean, I just...
It's a really odd feeling at my office every day, Mayor.
I bet it.
full of activity and noise and busyness, and we've got plenty to do with trying to analyze what happens next and how we do that, and putting in place all the requirements with the cleaning protocol and the PPE and how we would manage separation, but it is definitely not the summer that we had hoped for.
Boy, isn't Clay Horton a peach? I mean, this guy is so good. Nate and I, he is really something. Great to work with, stays calm all the time, and he likes to go by the rules, but he is really, really sharp, and we were really lucky to have him in our community.
Another Red Devil mayor.
So I assume the same comments are for the pools too, that
Yeah.
you wouldn't even be able to do anything logically because school goes back into session. When does school start? Anybody tell me?
They don't know.
Yeah.
They don't even know that. Good Lord.
The other day I heard 2 days a week for 9s and 10s, and 2 days a week for 11th and 12th grade. And I don't think anybody knows. And
I know that Clay
I think
mentioned
Nate's ready to go for it.
we won't have
Can we, have a
pool
2-minute
permits
break?
through the end of June at least. He said no pool permits through the end of June at least. So, yeah.
Yeah. Finished. That is sad. Yep. Thank you, ma'am.
I've had a lot of parents ask me.
We've taken several calls, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you all.
About golf. I took my sons on Friday evening to play golf at Hillcrest. Wait like 30 minutes to even get a cart. And then another 20, 30 minutes to get off.
Good problem.
It is a good problem to have.
People want to get outside and do something. Starving to do something.
We taking 5 or plowing on through?
He said take 5.
Take 5, okay. Take 2.
a lot of kudos go out to all the first responders. It's a police, fire, medical community, as it should be, EMS. But a little known unheralded fact is that all employees of Public Works are classified as first responders under the Homeland Security Act. So, you know, kudos to the Public Works employees, step up to the line time after time to respond to those needs. You know, talking about Public Works, looking at 7 really different distinct areas that we really break down into engineering and operations. Under our engineering, under our direction of our city engineer, Kevin Kellyan, and operations under the direction of Deputy Director Stephen Franklin. We'll start off with our engineering. Engineering budget is $3,534,032. That's down about 10%, lower $373,000. Personnel is attributable to the facts we've all heard here today. Maintenance is down some $541,000. And that can be really targeted street improvement reduction. Other is up $178,000, or down $178,000, excuse me. And that's really because we've transferred property maintenance demolition to the property maintenance account. So you'll see a increase in that account based on that transfer. If you look at the capital, it's down, up $299,000. In this budget, you'll see a request for an increase in our funding for our sidewalk maintenance program. Paving budget still set at $2 million. Paves approximately 7.5 miles per year.
Most of that money go to Jaeger Materials?
Yes, sir. The sidewalk maintenance budget increase requested in this budget is adding $300,000 to your Community Vision Fund, $300,000. This slide represents the 12 neighborhood alliances that we utilize for our sidewalk maintenance program. And at the bottom half, you can see that there's 6 areas that we have worked in, starting back way to 2005. And at the top part, you'll see that there's 6 areas that we have not yet worked in or currently working in and haven't finished. So this funding is still an infrastructure funding, desperately needed to bring our sidewalks into a safety and compliance status. Next area that I'd like to briefly talk about, go through, is our operations side. Street Department budget $2,259,713 is down approximately 16%, $416,000. That's attributable mainly to other category, which you'll see a category last year was placed under miscellaneous administrative expenditures. That's not shown in this budget. Please note also in the street department, there's no change in this level of service, no change in maintenance, and not reflected in this budget is a lot of money for salt, as our storage capacity is still full presently. You know, compare our infrastructure between the street department, engineering department, you'll see that our resurfacing account is the same as was last year. Target street improvements are nearly that amount. Concrete street maintenance is the same. Maintenance of streets, the street department is the same, and then adds in the sidewalk. So the total amount of money spent is comparatively to what we saw last year. Next department would be our stormwater, so we refer to our ditch crew, at $448,908. It's down 11%, $56,000. Personnel is up as other departments. The other you see is down about $49,000, and that can be attributed to some contracted services, decrease in the amount of those. In spraying, we've done primarily brought back in-house. And we've decreased the amount that we use for what I call a nuisance animal control. You know, our ditch crew maintains about 59 miles of ditches, about 8.3 miles of them concrete bottoms to muck and clean out. They also maintain 29 basins and mow 191 acres right away in fields of such. You know, city manager previously touched on is that part of this budget is a conversion really of some temporary employees into a permanent employee. You know, we as many departments, agencies throughout the area are combating the lack of employees in many areas. One of the issues we found in stormwater maintenance is that we use very expensive equipment, tractors, batwing bush hogs, mini excavators, those type. It's difficult to bring in seasonal employees that lack the experience and training and put them on those types of pieces of equipment in a very short period of time. So this request is really based on the utilization of equipment in an effective manner, the use of the equipment in the correct manner, that's cut down on repairs, and the safety for the employee and others that happen to be in that area. It's really an offset as this full-time employees portion of it will be covered by a reduction in the number of seasonal employees that we have to have. The turnover rate of those are very high, so that if you need really two of them to work, then you have to really hire four to be able to get to two. So this will help offset that.
Wayne, I'm sure you have this ditch cleaning and all that. You've probably tried to contract that out before and didn't get a very good result.
Yes, sir. We actually did contract out at one time, and the cost of contracting it out was double what it cost to do it in-house. So, you know, they too experience the same things, the same equipment cost, the same labor cost, and in comparison of our labor cost with their labor cost, they too are seeing insurance spikes. They are too, you know, combating the rise in hourly wages. So
that's included their health benefits plans and all that stuff too that the city employees have versus
right.
So small contract.
Not only do we muck and mow and maintain the ditches, you know, all of our employees are full-time, have their applicators licenses, so they can spray all herbicides, whatever is necessary in ditches, around aquatic waterways. They're licensed to do that. So
I figured you did. It just,
you know,
it's a question.
But you know, that's really one of the primary reasons looking at this is. I think in the long run, the amount of efficiency that we gain will be offset by the losing some of the temporary and bringing in full time. So, you know, property maintenance. You see that this budget about $375,865, up $140,000. Of that $140,000, about $125,000 of that is for demolition. This past year was $166,000, but we had some houses, properties that were in that legal process. This year we're going to be starting anew, so it'll be a time-consuming process to bring those properties to that status. So,
I think I asked you this before, but do you have any idea of just how many?
I think last count I had in my head
down?
that vacant properties, now I can't say the extent of their condition, but vacant properties, I think last count I had was like 114.
Vacant houses. They want to be on 4th Street.
You know, the personnel costs are up somewhat as we're funding the part-time inspector position. Supplies are down due to the fact that last year we brought a field computer system online. This year we've got those materials on hand, so we'll have to replace those. And if you look at some of the numbers previously, I guess originally looked at back around August, you can see the total number of complaints initial inspections, the re-inspections, notice of non-compliances, citations, the amount of liens that have been filed on the property. So, you know, this activity has increased with changes in the ordinance. The enforcement activity has stepped up. So this is much needed influx of manpower into that department. As previously said, last year in engineering was 166 transferred to property and maintenance. This year it's 125,000. The buildings budget, $1,509,484. It's down about 8%, $132,000. Personnel is up as other departments. Maintenance is up primarily based on cost of materials. Capital projects is down about 196,000. That's really based on project specific. In other words, over a period of time or certain periods of time, we may replace windows or we may repair roofs or whatever. And so it is what is evaluated for that year to be undertaken. You know, grounds budget is $2,329,176. It's down about 5%, $127,000. You see the other category is down considerably. Year before last, we had to rebid our mowing contract. We had to estimate the amount of money that we thought it was going to come in at. It was rebid, and this reflects the mowing contract that we obtained. So that's a contract renewable for a period of up to 5 years, 1 year increments, I believe. So this is our second year. So.
What's it cost to maintain Smothers Park with all that greenery and stuff down there?
You know, off the top of my head, I can, you know, we have a manual here that we can pull out the cost for Smothers Park, break it down into grounds and buildings. But off the top of my head, you know, I would say it's about $300,000, $380,000.
That's close enough. I just was kind of curious. Just most of that's greenage in there. Is it as low a maintenance type of flowering or whatever you want to call it as possible to hold down your maintenance costs?
If you actually look at Smothers Park, it was designed with very few what I call replants every year, and that you have a lot of shrubbery, the annual grasses, that type of things that could come back year after year after year. You know, a lot of the cost for that park that you incur is one would be replacement cost. So that's money that's set aside for future replacements. And the other thing is what I call the use of the park. You know, the use of that park is extremely high as compared to what we originally thought it would be. So, you know, annually we have things like swings or benches that get scraped on or marked up. Water will be cycled in and out, taken, sandblasted, and repowder coated and brought back. You know, you have chemicals for the fountains and the spray park. You know, you have the inlet water feature cleanings. You have the debris dredging in front of the water fountain. So, you know, when you look at Smothers Park, what you're really looking at is that whole area from really Davis Street to Frederica Street, and really includes a lot of the Veterans Boulevard. So while it seems high based on the use, then I would say it's comparable to what you find in other parks.
So the landscaping, that's what I'm kind of thinking about as much as anything. Is that broken out anywhere?
That we have actually a grounds cost or what's attributed to that. So it's about as low a cost of an area as landscaping as you can get.
That's why, you know, I'm just thinking about the type of flowers and shrubs and all that stuff.
You know, if you compare it to like Cap Gardner Park, where you have seasonal plantings in the flower beds, the tulips, the different begonias, whatever they're planted all throughout the year, they're changed out. At Smothers Park, the only things really planted down there are the little stainless steel planters that you see on the street.
Okay, thank you.
You know, there's very limited grass areas for mowing. It's very, so, you know. You know, here's kind of a list of some different things, comparisons of the activities, buildings and grounds. You know, while they're both the maintenance, you know, some of it's new work, some of it's maintenance work. Our garage budget's $1.477 million. It's up about 5%, $68,000. Personnel, once again, is a repeat. And if you look at capital on here, it's up $32,000. In the garage, an expanding fleet, storage and safety are two concerns. Housekeeping, to keep a thing in order, you have to have somewhere to put and store things. The number of vehicles we now have in our fleet and varying vehicles that we have to maintain a stock of tires that are mounted on rims for police cars, for fire trucks, for different vehicles. We have a room in that area that we have, like, I'll call 4 old pipe tire racks that are double layered, where you manually put tires on and have to lift them up to the second floor, second part of it, put in floors. In the capital budget, it adds a tire carousel that actually is a rotating mechanical system. It brings it down to ground level so that an individual, you can think of if you had to change the front tire on a fire truck, the size of that tire, that you could roll those on and off of that rack. The cost of that unit is like $28,000, which is about a fourth of the cost if we were to think about adding on a storage area for that building. So not only does it maximize the storage capability of the existing facility, it increases the capability for housekeeping, because now we can use that other room to store the creepers, the floor jacks, the jack stands, the things that clutter the floor, and address safety and housekeeping at the same time. When you talk about essential services, especially during this COVID period, one of the things that a lot of people forget is the garage is an essential service. You look at the number of vehicles, pieces of equipment they maintain, which is about 1,100. When you think about the police cars, the fire trucks, the sanitation trucks, the snow plows, different things, all of those are essential pieces of equipment. Very limited backup numbers in any of them, so they have to keep moving. So. Our sanitation budget, $7,582,000. It's actually down about 10%, it's $861,000, and that can be really attributed to mainly the capital. Capital expenditures reflect on what equipment, trucks that were replaced on a rotation basis. And in this category, I'd like to point out and give kudos to both the Deputy Director Franklin and to our garage manager, Jim Adley. New tier engines cost on leaf vacs have increased the price of leaf machines from like a $37,000–$40,000 to like $130,000. So instead of replacing all these units, then they've evaluated the cost to rehab the entire unit, reutilizing the diesel motor, and saving approximately $80,000 on each unit. So through their efforts, they've estimated we'd probably save close to $400,000 from not replacing leaf machines, but rebuilding some existing ones. So I want to give those folks credit for that effort. When we look at our transit budget, it's about $3.178 million. It's down about 16%, or $616,000. Once again, if you look at the capital section, you'll see that that's the mainstay of that decrease. Last budget, through grants and some city match, we purchased 2 buses. This year, those buses aren't in that budget, so that's the reason for that decrease under capital. The federal government, in response to the COVID, bestowed upon the city of Owensboro a CARES Act grant at the tune of over $4.8 million. One of the factors that we can do this year is that city match for 2021 can be utilized, part of that grant can be utilized to make that city match. Other things that we're contributing or looking to add to that are those areas which would require a city match in the future, such as capital expenditures of a bus, mechanics trucks, perhaps a new trolley. Currently we're looking at putting dividers in buses to protect drivers in this situation. supplies, operational expenses from COVID-19. A transit study to actually evaluate where the transit facility should be. What should it be? Where should it be located? Updating our bus shore system and adding new additional bus shelters into our system.
So where are we on the transit study?
Right now, we're just thinking about it. We've not done it. The one has not been implemented as of yet.
Okay, thank you.
Wayne, if I could, please. The 4.8 million, is there a time limit or when you have to use that money, or is it just in 1 year, or can you use it over a 4-year period of time, or how's that all divided out?
Angela or Danae may correct me, but I think most federal grants have a time frame of around 3 years.
Thank you, Wayne.
Everything I've seen with this, they would like you to spend the money as quickly as possible, but I have not read anything that has a particular time limit on the expenditure of
Now,
this.
the whole idea was get that money in the economy.
Yes.
Oh, you got it.
You know, within one of the improvements we've been working on this past budget and this budget is to increase the number of bus shelters that we have installed throughout the community, and to locate benches at bus stops. You know, we've been working on that, and you know, this past year we've purchased 12 bus shelters. We've got 2 more budgeted in this budget. May see more than that with COVID money. Benches, we installed 5. Got 10 more budgeted in this budget.
Good.
One of the biggest challenges or hurdles to overcome in the location of these shelters is getting permission to locate them in various places. You know, it's a time-consuming process if we don't have the right-of-way, to acquire the right-of-way, to do surveys, construction grants, the process. So it's one of those things that's a lot easier said than done.
Not much room on some of them, is there? Drops off into a ditch, doesn't it?
Especially on Frederica Street.
Yeah.
And then a lot of those state required state permits.
It's crazy. The people that need it the most make it the hardest on them.
Just 2 more comments, please, if I could.
Yeah.
Wayne, would you be able to just look, I know we are paving a lot of roads, which is fantastic, that we haven't been able to do before, but is it possible that you could evaluate any type of bike routes or anything else on some of the streets, if possible, please, that are being repaved and repainted?
Yes, sir. Anything's possible. You know, any question that's thrown out is that, you know, we look at it from first of all an engineering standpoint. You know, what's the feasibility from an engineering standpoint that request can be accommodated? You know, what are the challenges that have to be overcome or addressed? You know, whether it be a bike route or, you know, on-street parking. You know, so that would be the first evaluation process. Then the other is the direction of the city manager and the commission. Is that, you know, we operate within those guidelines and within those directions.
Thank you, Wayne. I was looking specifically at Ford Avenue, but I will wait on your expertise. Just another last question. Is this your last budget presentation?
Very well could be.
Thank you for all you've done. Thank you for all you've done.
You're welcome.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
On the paving, the $2 million, is that about the same as we did last year?
It's miles-wise, I think it's comparable. Price-wise, it's about the same. I think it's in a couple $100,000 of the same.
I don't know if I should have asked Angela this or you or somebody, but are there rules about riding bicycles on sidewalks?
Actually, I think there, under city ordinance, I think there is a rule that's got an age limit, I believe, and off the top of my head, I'm thinking it's 12 years old, but I'm not 100% certain, but there is an ordinance that does address riding bicycles on sidewalks.
Because it's just ironic. Someone called me yesterday and was saying that people were riding down the sidewalk and it was dangerous how fast they were going, and there were people trying to walk on the sidewalk at the same time, and
Well, you know, it's
I didn't know what to say.
kind of a double-edged sword here is that, exactly. You get calls about riding on the sidewalk, then you get calls about them riding in the street, so I know bike path, bike lane.
I mean, you can't find a bicycle anymore, any of the Walmart, anywhere else. In the last 60 days, you can't find bicycles. They are gone. Everywhere.
And fishing poles.
Question. Thank you. Hey, Wayne, I get a lot of calls about sidewalks, and you said how we're going to have an extra close to 300,000. Can you explain to people how we fix our sidewalks and then how we're going to use this extra money? Because it's the thing that I seem like I get tons of calls about sidewalks.
You know, we have a sidewalk maintenance program. The sidewalk maintenance program is basically where each neighborhood alliance is rated over a period of years. And let's say that the defects are given so many points for the different types of defects. When we finish up one neighborhood alliance, then the next one with the highest rating, then we go in that area and we fix what they call the toe stumpers, the trip hazards. And we would go through and mark them and repair all of those. And we work through it at one neighborhood alliance at a time. So presently it takes a little over a year to complete a neighborhood repair. That's at the current $300,000 level. So if we take that to $600,000, then I'm hoping that, you know, maybe we can get 1.5 or you know, cut down that number.
Very good. Thank you.
You know, we do have a program that if an individual has a house or a residence, they have a sidewalk in front of their house that they would like to have replaced, is that if we have money available for the material for the concrete, that we'll pay for the concrete and they pay for the labor and we'll replace the sidewalk.
Thank you. David come.
You have to have backup.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Okay, it's be back to me for a while and back to myself. Kevin, anything you want to add?
No, sir.
Okay.
Oh, Kevin.
Okay, up next is non-departmental. So as the name implies, these are just the sort of projects or things that don't really fit in any specific department. Some of them we've already discussed in some form, so we'll go blow through those pretty quickly. For example, the CERS or the pension reserve, we had an earlier slide that talked about that, how we're contributing the approximately $758,000 that otherwise would have been our pension contribution into the pension reserve account. So we have that set aside for our future pension expenses. I referenced it earlier. Wayne also referenced it a couple of slides ago on the transfer to transit, how that was a savings of $994,000 thanks to that grant that we got. So that was a savings that we definitely appreciate. COVID-19 expenses, I referenced this again earlier. We have a $200,000 COVID contingency. We just don't really know what to expect. There's a lot of uncertainty, so we just want to have a contingency there for us based on what we may encounter relative to COVID. Next is a big line item, incentives of $500,000. I know there's some interest among the commission in strengthening the amount that Abby has available to her as we look at sort of that near downtown or west of downtown area. So at this point, I'd really, frankly, I'd hope to have a little bit more programs developed, but sort of that got wiped out in the last month or so by COVID because Abby spent a considerable amount of time dealing with those CDBG applications that we took, and she's still dealing with those applications, frankly. But the idea is that we have money there that's more flexible. The federal money is great. We certainly appreciate it, but the federal money a lot of times has a lot of strings attached and is very restrictive on how it can be used. Since that there was some interest among the commission in having some additional funds that were local funds that were more flexible, I guess. And so we'll flush that out as Abby gets moving into the northwest area, and if she gets maybe the second person on board in her department, and they can look strategically at how to best deploy those. So that's there as a placeholder. We'll bring some programs back to you guys probably over the winter with how to potentially spend that. But it would just be to strengthen our efforts in the downtown and the west of downtown area as a target area using some local funds. Next is wayfinding signage. Wayfinding signs are basically the attractive directional signs to help visitors or locals find various facilities or amenities in the community. I know this was a recommendation of the OBKY initiative a couple of years ago, so we're proposing to allocate an additional $95,000. We have $45,000 in the current budget that we would carry over for a total of $140,000 for that. Again, this would be more directional signage around town and downtown and that type of activities. And this is what I think we consider phase one. We'll come back probably in a year or two and try to do the larger directional signage along the major thoroughfares, around the bypass, and that kind of thing. So we anticipate sort of the nice big signs like you see in Lexington or other communities that have, some type of logo and directional with panels for various venues or tourist attractions. The state pretty heavily controls or regulates that because a lot of those signs go on state routes like the bypass or 231 or 431 or those kind of routes. So they're pretty particular about how to do that. So we'll navigate that with the consultant. But this would get us started at kind of a phase one, more of the in-town directional signage. And then finally, it's $75,000 for some type of decorative entry to downtown. I also sense that there's interest in doing something around the 9th and Frederica area. I think Father Larry from Brescia has expressed interest in if we could spruce up that area for them as well. So don't know exactly what that might be yet. That might be that we do that intersection to more of one of the signature intersections and maybe some kind of signage in that area, welcome to downtown. But this would be to get a designer on board to give us some options, and then we can figure out what type of attractive feature we would want to put to let visitors know that they're entering our downtown, to kind of go along with the decorative street lights that OMU has put south to 9th Street over the last year or so as well. So again, to kind of theme around that and signify that a visitor is entering downtown Owensboro. Any questions about any of those projects? Okay, next are the TIF funds. These numbers provide rough estimates for the 2020 increments for the TIFs. The TIFs operate on calendar years instead of fiscal years. And again, these are very rough estimates. So more specifically for the Gateway Commons TIF, in the next month or so, we'll probably bring forward an agreement for the Commission's approval that would really more thoroughly or more clearly detail how that increment for Gateway Commons gets shared or split. So this is really just a placeholder, just lumping it under one category, and then you'll have a further document that would dictate how we share those funds going forward. And then for the downtown TIF, it's pretty simple because all of those increment or the new revenue we keep ourselves to use for debt service for the parking garage and our share of our contribution to the Bluegrass Museum and those kind of things, the various debt that we've undertaken, and we'll pay the debt service from those funds. So that one's pretty simple. It just goes to us for debt service.
Are the numbers indicated, Nate, are these cumulative?
No, that's just for the year.
Only
so the revenue would just be for the 2020 increment.
Okay.
So it's not cumulative, and again, it sort of works on a delay because, by the time we submit 2020 increments in April of 2021, we wouldn't get it until October of 2021. So it's almost the next fiscal year. So it kind of works weird sequencing in some respects that even I have trouble. I have to every time go back and think through the timing of what year's dollars we're talking about. It's pretty complex.
On calendar year also.
Because it operates on a calendar year instead
Calendar
of a
year,
fiscal
January
year.
of 17 activated, so you go through that calendar year. Submit April of 18, don't get it until November of 18.
So the fall.
Almost.
So even when we get because again, we've submitted the 2019 increment within the last month or so, right, in April. So we will probably get that this fall. So in the upcoming budget year, we would actually receive and probably distribute the 2019 increment.
Okay.
But these numbers are looking at the 2020 increment. So again, it's a timing issue that even I have to kind of stop and think through what we're doing and how we're doing it. So luckily we have two very good people who track that and live that much more than I do. But again, from the larger perspective, Gateway Commons will bring another document back that you guys will approve to allocate those And, downtown is pretty simple because we use all our sales for debt service.
Is the Gateway Commons, or both tips, are they operating as expected? Or is it too early to even think about what maybe COVID-19, what impact we're having here?
For the most part, what we could tell from our first increment reimbursement request, that everything looked somewhat pretty much in line with the consultant's projections, with the exception of sales tax. If you'll recall, last year we had reported that there was a little bit of lag there because the stores didn't open up quite as early as the initial projections. And so, but here's some information for you. Like the revenues generated in 2018 that we requested and got reimbursed was $300,000, $306,000. So for the 2019, what was requested was $633,000.
And that's Gateway Commons.
Great, that's just Gateway Commons. So just to give you an idea of that there is substantial growth. And while I have the mic, I wanted to give kudos to Danae and Whitney. They got in a city vehicle and drove around to make sure that every business that we could collect on from the state, that she and Whitney had it in the spreadsheet. They're bulldogs, and that's a compliment. So, and it's quite tedious to sending out questionnaires, tracking the data, on top of everything else we do. So I just wanted to be sure and give kudos to Danae and Whitney for doing that, because it is a lot of work.
Thank you, ma'am.
Welcome.
Okay, up next, the Your Community Vision Fund, which is our capital projects and stormwater fund. And so Leland Hancock will present the YCV.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. As Nate just mentioned, Your Community Vision is your capital projects fund. A lot of those funds, as you can see, are stormwater related, and they go back to Kevin Collier and even Joe Shepard's days, where KIA debt was incurred to do a lot of these huge stormwater projects to advance us forward so we could get those low or somewhat no interest loans at that point, and really advanced the MS4 program there and helping out with our stormwater issues. It also helps fund our RWRA and other culvert pipes and different things in streets and issues that come up as well. Of course, parks is Fisher Park, restrooms, any type of amenities that get added or remodeled out there in our city. Public safety, you've got your fire station number 2 as part of that, your police range training classroom, and obviously you've got sidewalk money there in public works. As you can see, we've got some sidewalks in town that need some effort, and I take my hat off to Wayne and Kevin Collier as well for their efforts with the sidewalk repair program. So those additional funds we have there will be added to the other funds to help them move along with some of the complaints that you all receive and we receive as well. There's never enough money to go around, but we try to do as many as we can. Additionally, you'll see some culvert work there on one of the projects, and that $1.4 million is broken down into about 4 different pieces. You have RWRA, which is a stormwater crew that does work for us to do repairs in backyards, different things like that. We also have an outsourced crew that comes in and takes care of other issues where they are cave-ins in the streets if RWRA is unable to make it in time. There's only so many staff out there. We also have ravine sewer this year that we have some money there for an additional project with RWRA that we're negotiating now. Some of the fun projects we get are Parks and Recreation. We got Amanda Rogers leading this one, and Fisher Park's come along very well. It actually, Nate and I were out there Friday. It's amazing to see how that place has turned around. I talked to Eddie Atherton over the weekend, who was originally part of that project when they built the place and planting the trees and some of the different things they've done. So even he had a lot of positive comments to say of how amazing it's turned out to be a pretty good project. Well, it does say City of Owensboro, so on the ball pad, yes. We can talk to Amanda and see if something like that can't be added. Yeah, there's a long list, I'm sure, that could be added. But she's done an amazing job with that, and that project's moving forward, and as she said, they will finish what would have been phase 3, basically in 2 phases, and currently they're coming in under budget. So. Another one of our needed projects, working with the fire chief and his staff as well, was the expansion to fire station number 2. As that area and corridor of our city has grown, so has fire service and the need for it. This will allow for additional staff in that building and then give that basically public space for them to have living quarters and their living space as well, or sleeping space, I'm sorry, in this expansion. And that is it for your vision.
Any YCV questions for Leland? Okay, moving on, the agencies are next. I know there's always quite a bit of interest in agencies. So generally speaking, we're proposing a 2% increase for agencies with a few exceptions. One of those exceptions would be if we had a prior arrangement with them for a different funding amount, or if they requested less than a 2% increase. Obviously, we did not want to fund them more than they asked for. So those were the two biggest exceptions from the 2% increase. First item there is agency maintenance. That varies year to year. That's more of a maintenance account where some of the facilities at the various agencies we own, and so we budget for that maintenance just like we would for any of our facilities. So it varies year to year based on what maintenance might be needed in any of the facilities that we own, but typically would have a lease with for operation in the facility by the agency. Yes. That's, I think, well, let's see. Yeah, there's the Bluegrass Museum and Hall of Fame is top item there is the typical allocation for their funding contribution. And that's one of those that I referenced that is different. It is an exception because we had a prior arrangement with them that our funding would phase out. And so next year will be the last year of that phasing out. So it's down to one third of what it would have been 2 years ago. And then the other one, I believe Angela or Danae is utilities. So they're on the pilot, so they get treated the same because it's a city-owned facility. So they get treated the same that we do. So it's kind of like the same argument or the same issue as the utilities in some of the departments. There's a cost shown there, but it's actually not a cost to the agency because they're on the pilot. So there's offsetting revenue to where it's really you'll free electric, yes. So that's another one of note. And then on this slide, really the other one is Friday after 5. As you know, they canceled the 2020 season. We had already funded them their money for the 2020 season, so they agreed they would just hold it and we wouldn't have to give them any money next year. So we were able to zero out the Friday after 5 allocation for next year.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Did you say this is a 2% increase?
Or what they asked for, but yes.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to social services. Again, the same way. I think the only exception here, just one or two things to point out. Monday Center got a bigger than 2% increase, but that's based on the various discussions that we had over a few months over the winter to get them some additional money both in the current year and then to provide some additional funding for next year that they need. And then the other item of note here, if you look at the last item, is a new project. That's the United Way Vision Grant. We've had some preliminary discussions about this as well. But this is a program through United Way whereby they will find an agency or program if there is a particular issue that you wish to address. So say, for example, the commission is interested in childhood literacy, okay, as an example. So they would go find various agencies that would maybe provide a service or program for that particular issue. So I just sense that there was interest among the commission in potentially looking at an issue or two. So again, that's really more at your discretion. I put that there that we would revisit that with David Ross during the year potentially about if you have an interest in whatever issue it is, homelessness, childhood literacy. It could be obviously any myriad of issues, but then that we would identify the issue. David would work with various agencies. Could be an existing United Way agency, or it could be a new agency that's not currently a United Way agency, that they would give us some options for potential programs to address that issue that you have identified.
And this type of program, Nate, if I'm not mistaken, it's very much in the preliminary stages of how to be able to administer it, whether or not their usual 8% comes out of it or not, or whether there are rules that they have today that apply to so many other agencies that already go to it. For example, the homelessness issue that you referenced, many of our homeless centers don't comply with United Way or the hospital grants. There's several grants that just don't because of homelessness and what happens on those campuses, whether smoking or whatever the case may be. But that still has to be vetted, right? You still
That's correct.
need to figure out what that is.
That's
going to
correct.
be. Okay.
It is preliminary, right? So we would, I mean, each potential program or agency, yes, right. Yeah, depending on the issue that the commission wishes to address.
Okay.
And then the final slide for agency funding is government services. These are these agencies that we, are public agencies or we have an interest in or appoint board members to that's a public agency. So the biggest one here is the airport that's worth discussing. That's atypical. The airport, the current year is the last year of a 3-year commitment from the city and the county to provide an additional $100,000 to the airport. So in talking to them and trying to figure out what we should do, we weren't comfortable to decrease the full $100,000 as maybe was the intent several years ago. That would be a pretty big budget cut that they felt like they could not sustain. So we did decrease it, I think, about 50% or 50,000, but then that gave them the 2%, which made a net decrease of $45,937. Of course, the airport also has the Cape Air pilot training program. So we did include in the economic development fund a $25,000 allocation specifically for the flight training program for Cape Air, should that be needed. So there is some additional funding in addition to the $150 that we're proposing. So if you combine that, it would be a potential appropriation total of $175,000 as a decrease from the $196 that they got in the current fiscal year.
Question about the sister cities, the Japanese, and it seems like in recent years that the other sister city from the Czech Republic has absorbed this $2279 into their budget, and I was just curious as to how that occurs. Don't know. Me neither.
That's my understanding as well. I think there's just one sister cities agency, so the funding, I believe, goes to the same place.
Well, you got it separated out, so that's true. We're not even in contact with the Japanese city anymore.
We can clean that up into one line. Yeah.
We can clean that up because
Sure.
if, not necessarily does Czech Republic need it, maybe there's another agency that could use the $2,200 is my thought.
Curious question, please. OMPC, for such a large $236,411 with no increase, was that just simply what they asked for without any type of investigation of how their funds are, their permitting, more permits being done, or how was that done?
That's one where they do get fees for services provided, right? So inspections and the plan review and that kind of stuff. So if a developer or builder submits plans to the planning commission, then there is a fee for that. So they're doing well on that end, and so they've not needed an increase for us. In fact, I think maybe for the last 2 or 3 years, if I remember correctly. But right, so that was the request, and certainly we didn't want to give them more than they asked for.
I just thought maybe it would go down, but hey, that's just wishing, I guess.
It's been the same as far back as the budget book shows.
Has it?
17, 18.
Yeah. So appreciate Brian and his willingness to do that.
Question, does the county also contribute the same amount?
They contribute to the planning commission. I don't know if it's the same amount, because actually I believe it's dictated by the ordinance, because there was a joint ordinance that created the joint planning commission, and that it detailed whether it's 50-50 or 60-40 or, I don't know how it works or whether it's population-based. I don't remember offhand, but I know that there is an ordinance that dictates funding, and the county contributes. In fact, probably look, but I think the county contributes like 160-something to the planning commission, but we can look it up in just a minute.
I'd like to see the sister cities thing. I'm for us having some kind of relationship with some other communities or other cities, but we need them to be doing something for us. If it's Japanese, if it's Japan, then let's have a car dealership or something here.
Yeah.
I think that we ought to be.
Well, your point's well taken, because it's always my thought that it should have an economic development aspect to it, but in essence, it's a social function where the schools and the they exchange soccer teams and things such as that, or arts. They'll go over there and look at the arts, but there's really no, even actually I don't know, whenever I was here before, but, we actually tried to figure out a way to incorporate Owensboro grain with some of the people in the Czech Republic and our bourbon industry. But it's always gotten right back to the point where it's, it started out with Bill West out at the community college and years ago, and it was an exchange program for the students, and we still probably have that, but there's no economic development component to this.
I mean, and I don't want you to misunderstand me. It's not that I'm against that. That's
Sure.
not it at all. Sure. I'm just thinking that there can be some way that we could get more out of it than what it is right now. And whether it needs to be revamped and relooked at or whatever, I'm all for the students exchanging and understanding the world and different cultures and all that. I used to have an exchange student myself, so I understand that. But I still think that there still can be something that we can get out of it that's going to help our economy and
Sure. And I do recall that the mayor of Olib Moss, did I say it came here a couple of years ago. And actually, there was a trip planned this year that was a firefighter-specific exchange where we were going to have 3 or 4 of our firefighters, 3 or 4 county firefighters were going to go over there, and then next year they were going to reciprocate to come over here and do, for cross-training to see how each handles training and deployment of fire resources. So that one's probably a little bit more specific to the city and how we could potentially benefit from it, but I understand your concerns.
And I've always believed from an economic development standpoint, we could look within the United States of America and find a like city that has some of the same issues and some of the same accomplishments as our community, and learn from within our borders, and it would be a whole lot more towards economic development than social program and student exchange. But I mean, there are a lot of cities in the nation that have sister cities within continental United States. To me, that would lend us more to economic development. Because, we tried to do sister city Japan when I was here before, and for 8 years while I was gone, they lost complete contact with them. Mayor's changed, and I've been working for the last 3 or 4 years trying to rebuild that relationship, and we exchange Christmas cards. But if you're talking about economic development, where this city is, it's 25 miles from Toyota City. So you would have a whole lot better opportunity for economic development with Japan, I think, than you are going to have with the Czech Republic. So.
And then Angela just provided the information. Commissioner Maglinger, pretty close. The county funds the Planning Commission $159,510. So I thought it was in the 160 range. So that would be basically a 60-40 breakdown.
Yep. All the gross in the county.
Okay, this is just sort of a general high-level summary slide that shows general fund spending by function instead of by department, just to give you a different sense of where our funding goes.
So out of the general fund, 1.5 is for debt service, and that's declining, I assume, correct?
That is declining, and as the downtown TIF revenues continue to increase, that will continue to decline.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, up next is the revenue number, so that is Angela Hamrick.
My favorite topic. All right, the general fund has around, or at least, I'll say 120 individual revenue accounts. And what this slide represents is what I call the top 5 revenue sources. And so, as you see reflected on this slide, the total of these top 5 is $48,183,891, or 81.5% of our total general fund revenues. This budget reflects no rate changes rather. Any increases that you see in our budget will come from anticipated growth in the revenue base that is associated. This is the second year where TIF activity is reflected in our budget. Our occupational license fees, our payroll withholding, is the city's largest revenue stream. At a rate of 1.78% on an employee's payroll, 1.45% of that goes to the general fund for the general operations of the city. 0.33% goes to the Your Community Vision Fund for our capital projects. This budget reflects a net reduction of $626,951 from forecast. This is primarily due to the effect of COVID. Now notice I said net reduction. For our 1920 forecast, we reduced our license fee revenue estimate by approximately $450,000. And when we looked forward to our 2021 budget, we calculated our occupational license fee where we thought we would be in a normal year, and due to the COVID implication, reduced that by $1.1 million. So having said that, I wanted to speak a little bit to the approach that we took in calculating and deriving those estimates. We were very careful to not be too conservative and not be too aggressive. We just wanted it to be realistic. So Nate has contact over at, with Brittany over at EDC and different CEOs throughout the city, and he made contact with them on a weekly, if not daily basis to find out where they were, what their plans were, how could we move, what kind of revenue stream might we depend on from them for payroll. We also had reports written by our IT department where we could generate the top 10, top 50 by what is noted as a BIC code. When we set up a business license, it's set up by BIC code. So you're going to have full seating restaurant, you're going to have, not the full service restaurant, so on and so forth. You got different types of retail. So we can run reports by these BIC codes. So we drilled all the way down to that granular level. We spent time on this. We also reached out to other cities and other finance directors to find out what approach they were taking. And in one city, in fact, it was Hopkinsville, shared an interesting approach, which we borrowed off of them. And we didn't budget annually. We budgeted very monthly. We looked at what the budget would be each particular month, and there was less of a decrease with each month as we went out into the year. And in addition to that, we used the state numbers, forecasting information, pulled all that together, and it was science and art more than ever this year. And so that's how we derived the forecast that we got here, hoping it comes in better than what we budgeted, but that's the approach we took. So, and then down to property tax is our second largest revenue stream. This budget reflects a growth of $632,885. We've got several aspects to property tax. There's real, ad valorem, tangible. Well, the real and ad valorem, same thing. Tangible, vehicle, franchise. And also wanted to mention that the city's assessments are on the rise more now than ever due to all the economic development we have going on. I don't have final PVA numbers yet, but I do know and have heard enough, seen enough, that we've got more new property in this upcoming property tax year than I've ever seen. So we've got more new property than I've ever seen. You've heard where we cannot, by statute, we can't raise our property tax revenues by more than 4%. You've heard that. Well, that's only based on current property. Okay, so so the new property is gravy, if you will, for lack of a better term. So that new property is not restricted into that 4% cap for the calculation. So what I'm saying in a very long-winded way is that this new property is going to be extra more revenues for us on top of that 4%. So I think
does all of it stay in the general fund?
No, it does not, Commissioner. That's a very good question. I was gonna, in fact, that's a good segue into that next situation or topic. What you see in the general fund is our net. It's the net property tax revenue. We got revenues that go out to the Economic Development Fund for the annexation development payments. We've got one large annexation that ended this last year, and it's got phases 2, 3, and 4 ending this calendar year. Then there's also monies that are worked into our budget going out to the Gateway TIF, going out to the downtown TIF. So that's been taken into consideration as well. So it's a net number, what you see here in the general fund.
So there will be monies coming in to the general fund, then taken back out to the various categories you just mentioned.
Correct. And that's how we do occupational net profit. The gross amount comes in, and then we'll transition out how much needs to go to down the IPLF for the downtown revitalization, for the occupational net profit. All of it works that way. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, you're welcome. Then our next revenue source here is the OMU cash dividend. By agreement, that's increased 2.5% every year. And then we got the insurance premium license fee. That's a fee, and there's always confusion on this, so I like to explain this. This fee is imposed on the insurance company. It's not on the individual. The insurance company chooses to pass it on to the individual. So I know a lot of people don't realize that, so I always like to point that out. Our city rate is 10%. 6% of that does stay in the general fund. 4% gets transitioned out to the downtown revitalization fund to pay for the debt service for our downtown revitalization. And last but not least is our net profit license fee, which is like, I like to refer to it as like a local income tax on our businesses. It's also 1.78%, with 1.45% going to the general fund, 0.33% going to the YCV. This budget also reflects a reduction of $398,250 from our forecast. This reduction is also primarily due to the anticipated effect of COVID-19. We did not take any COVID-19 effect into our 1920 forecast, because what we'll do there, that's based on 2019 activity unrelated to COVID. It's just a delayed time frame for filing. So what we don't receive, we'll look at that and analyze and make an adjustment on our books to reflect that income, even though the cash may be coming in later after June 30. So there's no effect in our forecast for that. If anybody has any questions on that long-winded presentation, I'm happy to try and answer.
That's taking into account all businesses don't really have to file their taxes until July 15th? Is that what it is?
For those that,
Just
for
taking
the
that-
tax returns that were due April 15th, they got an extension to July 15th.
Okay.
But not all our taxpayers had an April 15th deadline. And based on the analysis, we had like about 40%, we think, of our taxpayers took advantage of that extended time frame.
Which is a cash flow issue.
Correct. Now, and I can't say enough how thankful I am for the position that we're at, and thanks to you all in management. Other cities are really suffering. They're looking to get line of credit because their cash cannot maintain. Yes, sir. So we're able to float that with no problem, and we're in a fortunate position. In addition to the diverse economy that our city manager mentioned, that yeah.
Nate, are you hearing that same thing from KLC, that there are several cities that are just having issues dealing with all these additional costs, pension costs, healthcare costs, COVID-19 costs, everything that's happening, that there is a significant number of cities and or counties that are having problems?
Yes. Yes, no doubt.
83?
It's a lot. We're better off than most all of our peers. Truthfully, I can't really think of a city, maybe one or two across the state, that are in the same position that we are.
That's something to say. That's absolutely awesome. Thank you for everything you do. Thank you, Miss Angela. That's awesome. the hard work was done 4 years ago.
That's helped so much.
Okay, this next slide will mostly be Angela, but just briefly, so we do an annual forecast, or for multiple years, what we sometimes call the long-range plan. So looking at 1920, the first year, obviously that's the current fiscal year in which we are in today. So if you see that, we're estimating a $1.8 million surplus this year. For 2021, that's the budget we're discussing for next fiscal year. As I mentioned at the beginning, the budget has a $28,000 surplus. Again, Angela can speak to this better than I can. She will in just a minute. Just want to make sure you understand, though, this is very much a forecast. There are all kinds of assumptions, that may or may not come true. So it's kind of like a weather forecast, right? It hopefully is in the ballpark, but it won't be exactly accurate. So please don't hold it to us. It's just a tool for planning and for management to use looking out. And again, the more years that we had, the worse of the picture it will look because of the pension issue. If those rates, again, at 12% increase year over year at 12%, our revenues, I wish, but they do not grow at 12%, unfortunately. And so obviously that's not a good approach. So with that as a backdrop, Angela, feel free to make your comments.
Yeah, I think you did a great job, but I would just add to that, as you will notice, we go 1.8 and then we drop down to 28,000, and largely because we put things in savings, if you will. And then the next year, 1.254. And the purpose, the long-range plan, first of all, I'll say this long-range plan takes into consideration all the factors Nate mentioned. And I just wanted to say thanks to our diverse economy and the tax increase that the mayor alluded to, the general fund balance is healthy. As you can see, our forecasted surplus decline turns into a deficit in fiscal year 23-24. And I just wanted to point out to the commission and the viewing audience, that's how tax rates and fees are designed to function. When you do a tax increase, you want to do it sufficient enough that you have surplus, and you want that surplus to grow. And I know people look at that and they think they raised our taxes too high. Well, you've got to have that, because then after so many years, then it plateaus out. You need to build that fund balance and it plateaus out. And then after a couple years of that, it's going to decline and you're going to start eating into the fund balance. So it depends on how often you want to do a tax increase. And so I just wanted to point that out in case anyone sees the fund balance and thinks it's too high or they see the surplus. I just wanted to bring that to the viewing audience's attention, that we need that for our long range plan, because as you see in 23-24 we've got that deficit, and then 24-25 that deficit about almost doubles. I mean, it grows exponentially because our revenues rates are the same. Hopefully the economy grows, but expenses, as we all know, grow more quickly. And so I just wanted to point that out. And then we get the next. And that's just a pretty picture of everything I said. The blue bars is our fund balance. The red bar is the GFOA recommended minimum that you all adopted in our formal fund balance policy last year. And so according to the policy you all adopted, which is in line with GFOA's recommended best practice, you'll see the red line is where we need to be based on that policy, and the blue line is where our fund balance is. Anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Okay, just one more slide. This is it. So I think you all know what circuit breakers are. It's a built-in switch that protects an electrical system. Sometimes there's what's referred to as a circuit breaker in the stock market, right? If the stock market drops too high of a percentage in a single day, they just close it down and stop trading in order to stop the bleeding, essentially. And so I wanted to build in something like that for next year because of COVID. I mean, we've tried to plan, we've budgeted what we think is prudent and appropriate, but at the end of the day, we don't really know what's going to happen for next year. So identified just a few examples of things that we could do if we get into next fiscal year and things do what we don't want and they just bottom out, or the recovery is worse or prolonged or takes longer than expected, or God forbid doesn't occur at all for some period of time. I thought we needed to identify just some examples of things that we could potentially defer in order to make adjustments that we would have to do. So hopefully these things are not needed. This is really not an exhaustive list, but it was just kind of intended to show that we're planning for a really worst case scenario. We, as Angel said, we kind of budgeted not worst case, not best case, what we thought was prudent and reasonable, but we're also still planning for worst case scenario. And so, for example, the housing and grant coordinator that we talked about, I referenced and Abby referenced that we funded that for 6 months in the budget. We did that intentionally so we could get into the winter. And once we get past property tax season, have several months of occupational tax revenue to see how we're doing. If for some reason revenue is drastically underperforming, we just probably wouldn't fill the position. That's an easy adjustment that we could make in order to keep our budget solvent or keep it in the position it needs to be. If we get to that 6-month period and we're performing as expected or better than expected, we'll happily fill the position and provide Abby the extra support that she needs. Obviously, we have the COVID-19 contingency. We've talked about that $200,000 allocation. It's there as a circuit breaker, as a contingency. We even talked about the pension reserve could serve in that form, in some form or fashion. That's a long-term expense. We want to save for it, and we'll make those transfers quarterly. So if we make the first couple of transfers to that pension reserve account, suddenly realizing we're going to be upside down in our budget, revenue's underperforming, we can stop making those adjustments. I mean, we need to do it. It's prudent, but it's not a cost for this year. So it's a way to conserve cash flow for the current fiscal year until that recovers, and then we can make those long-term payments at a later date. Downtown entry signs are another example. The sidewalks, because we double the number of sidewalks, I don't want to have to potentially cut that. But because we were able to fund a big increase in doubling the amount of sidewalks, if we have to pull back 100 of that, or 150,000, Wayne could still get a 50% increase in sidewalk money. We could potentially recoup 150,000 of that, and he would get 150 more, for example, to sidewalk. So these are just a few examples of things that we've thought of. There are others. Mayor referenced even today some of the things in parks we could potentially pull that would help account for some of that. So just to show that we're planning for worst case scenario, but don't expect it.
It's about 140 or 1.4 million of a soft landing, if needed. Somewhere in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean it could be, because it would vary based on we could adjust what we would need for on sidewalks or on the pension reserve. So with that, unless there are any questions, our presentation is finished.
I hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, please. All in favor indicate by saying yeah.
Aye. Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you
staff.
all. Great job. Thank you.